We got 14 people with 14 likes already. I love it. Thank you for hitting that like button when you come into the live stream. Once this video, if this video, I don't know if I'm going to make this one public or not. We'll find out by the end of it here. But hitting that like button once the video, if it does go public, the algorithm will love to see that, and it starts sending the video around for more people to join in. Thank you. If you are just now becoming a member to the channel and this is the first time you've been to a membership only live stream, you should really enjoy this. All the comments will get read. We'll answer all the questions. In today's video, I'm going to break down some of Michelle Bowman's speech from about 6 weeks ago or so. This was given November 28th, 2023. And if I don't bore you enough with that, we may move into her most recent speech given just yesterday. And this is the path forward for bank capital reform. Now, I haven't read quite much of this speech yet. I have read a little bit of it, but not a lot. So we may break down some of that, but I would really like to break down this other one, the reflections on the economy and monetary policy, because I believe this speech right here is probably more in line with the general thinking of the Federal Reserve than any of that mainstream corporate media BS stuff that you're reading out there. This is from their own statements. This is their own words from, the voting members of the FOMC, or at least one of the voting members from the FOMC. But when you start breaking this stuff down, when you're reading the Fed's speeches, when you start looking at some of the things that are commonly stated within these speeches, you can kind of get a feel for what it is that they are thinking, what it is that they are looking to try and do as far as their strategy goes. And you start picking up on this feeling of what it is that they are doing. Now, once you have acquired this feeling and you really do notice that you are very much in line, not necessarily in agreement, but in line with their strategy, like you understand what it is that they're trying to do. Like I said, it doesn't mean that you agree with it or that you think it should go that way or that you may even have another way that you think it should go. That's not what we're considering here. We're just trying to consider what it is that they think and hopefully position ourselves in a way that does, the best for ourselves. And that's how we, pretty much survive during this crisis, is that we recognize how it is. By positioning ourselves in that way, when the crisis does hit, we should be in that position in order to take advantage of it. Now, it's sad to say, but you buy when there's blood in the streets, right? When everybody is crying about how they lost everything that they own and all that, that's when you get in, right? And it's not greed, right? I mean, it is greed, but it's not like a greedy, evil thing. It's nature. It's natural, right? It's just survival of the fittest. And this isn't a game. So it's not a matter of being fair, right? It's a matter of survival. And this is what we're doing here. Okay, so before I break down that speech, there's just a couple of things. So if you're new to the channel and you haven't quite grasped some of the credible threat theories or some of the ideas that I have with inflation, I'm going to leave a couple of speeches down in the description. One of them is to monetary policy strategies for a low neutral interest rate world, which I think is probably one of the greatest speeches ever written for foretelling what it is that the Federal Reserve was going to do. I'm going to make John Williams wish he had never written this speech. Like, I am going to reiterate this stuff over and over again, and he's going to wish that this thing would just disappear, but I'm not going to let it. Like, I'm going to keep bringing this thing up. Main thing in this speech to remember is that they had a problem, and this is what it says, and I say this in just about every one of my videos. Today we face an altogether different set of problems stemming from a very low neutral interest rate. That is, the short-term real interest rate that is consistent with an economy operating at its potential alongside low and stable inflation. Ironically, the problem we need to solve these days is the risk of inflation that is persistently too low rather than too high. They would rather have inflation persistently too high than too low. Their problem was that it was persistently too low rather than too high. So think about that. The Federal Reserve, although they don't want to state that out there to anybody, would much rather have the problem, if it was a problem, of having it in too high of inflation, right? Because the problem that they needed to solve was that inflation was too low rather than too high. Now, there's something else that he actually goes in to talk about in here, and this is something, again, we have to incorporate into the strategy, because a lot of times when we think about the Federal Reserve and bringing their inflation target to the 2%, that's not really what they're up to anymore. They're going for a 2% average inflation rate over time. And that right there, that little piece has so many people confused. Like that part, because everybody is like under this impression of this 2% target and that the Fed is trying to maintain this 2% target. That's not it. They're going for a 2% average over time. So let me read it as this. Okay, and this is still going from John Williams' speech from back in 2018. It says, as a result of the inherent God, sometimes I just can't say a word, asymmetry introduced by the lower bound on interest rates, an inflation targeting central bank could experience inflation that is below target. Now, after the quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4, they failed to achieve the 2% inflation target. That's exactly what he is saying, experiencing the inflation that is below target. Once we consider the average inflation rate over periods when policy is constrained and then when it is not. With inflation on average below the target level, inflation expectations will likely slip below the target rate as well. A simple example helps illustrate this problem. Say that 80% of the time, the lower bound on interest rates does not constrain policy and the central banks aim for a 2% inflation target. During these good times, an inflation targeting central bank aims to keep inflation near 2%. But 20% of the time, the inflation falls into recession, or the economy falls into recession that's severe enough that the lower bound constrains policy. This is very much like what we have experienced when the Federal Reserve lowered interest rates to 0. That's hitting the lower bound. It no longer stimulated the economy, right? Constrains policy. Assume that during these periods, inflation averages only 1%. So 80% of the time, inflation averages 2%, and 20% of the time, inflation averages 1%. The resulting average rate of inflation is about 1.8%. As a consequence, inflation expectations are likely to become anchored at the long-run average of 1.8%, below the desired 2% target. So you see what they're saying there, like right post of the great financial crisis, right, there was although all this money printing, right, quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4 took the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve from $850 billion to $4.5 trillion, even during that time, it failed to produce the inflation scenario that the Fed was looking for. Yes, it got it up over the 2% sometimes, but a lot of times it was running under that 2%, and that's exactly what he was describing there, that over the long run, it failed to achieve that 2% target that they were looking for, and it ended up being anchored below that, right? Now, this is where it gets kind of critical, right? All right, that's not the end of the story. This downward shift in inflation expectation has a second round effect on real interest rates, the economy, and inflation, right? So that's the problem, right? It has a second round effect on real interest rates, the economy, and inflation. When policy is constrained by the effective lower bound, the downward shift in inflation expectation raises the real interest rates. The downward shift in inflation expectation raises the real interest rates. This part right here took me a while to kind of figure out what the hell he was talking about, right? Raises the real interest rates, further diminishing the degree of monetary stimulus, making the downturn worse and reducing inflation even more. Even in times when policy is not constrained, the expectation of below target inflation in the future affects current decisions. Right? If the people don't believe there's inflation, or if they believe that there is inflation, it affects current decisions today, putting additional downward pressure on inflation. In other words, monetary policy is always swimming upstream, fighting a current of too low inflation expectation that interferes with achieving the target inflation rate. This is the major problems coming from the Federal Reserve. Does it sound like anything that they are experiencing today with the inflation expectation and the inflation scenario? No. This was their major problem. He wrote an entire speech dedicated to this exact problem. of a too low inflation expectations, right? Now, I'm not going to read this whole thing. I'm just going to read one more section and then we'll move on, right? But this is what he has to say as far as fixing these problems, right? He said the second option that they have here for offer is the average inflation targeting, whereby the central bank purposefully aims to achieve an above target inflation rate in good times, right? This is where the central bank, right, purposefully aims to achieve an above target inflation rate in good times when the lower bound is not constrained. Properly designed and implemented, such an overshoot can offset inflation undershooting during bad times. Remember? Right? So that the long run average inflation rate and the inflation expectations, right? Inflation expectations are in line with the target. This is really important information to understand because when this speech was given, the Federal Reserve wasn't going for a 2% average inflation rate, right? That changed. See, that changed on right here. August 27th, 2020, right? Now, this is a speech given by Jerome Powell. And in this speech, he is referring to the average inflation rate, right? As far as changing it from the typical 2% target, they move it to a 2% average inflation rate over time, right? The only problem with this is that here we go. He talks about it right here. The persistent undershoot of inflation from our 2% long-run objective is a cause for concern. Many find it counterintuitive that the Fed would want to push up inflation. After all, low and stable inflation is essential for a well-functioning economy. We are certainly mindful that higher prices for essential items such as food, gasoline, and shelter add to the burdens faced by many families, especially those struggling with lost jobs and incomes. However, inflation that is persistently too low can pose serious risks to the economy. Inflation that runs below its desired level can lead to unwelcome fall in long-term inflation expectations, which in turn can pull actual inflation even lower, resulting in the adverse cycle of ever lower inflation and inflation expectations. Right? So again, this was their problem, and they switched it to the average inflation rate over time. However, there is no metric for figuring out what average inflation rate is. I forget where I had actually marked that in this speech, but I won't make you wait for me to find it in here because I can't remember. I thought I had marked it down, but obviously I didn't do that. And oh well, that's kind of embarrassing for it. But anyway, you guys remember me talking about it. The other part, I guess, really probably would be more critical on that is that they actually did a working paper on it called Average Inflation Targeting in the Financial Crisis. So this right here was given January 10th of 2022. Right? And so in this, they are talking about the federal funds kept its key short-term interest rates, the Fed funds rate, near zero for 7 years during the recession and economic recovery from the 2008 global financial crisis. During this time, inflation stayed stubbornly below the 2% target set by the Federal Open Market Committee. And then they go into talking about the average inflation rate. But again, they don't give any kind of real description on how it is that they figure out what the average inflation is. And they don't really give it any kind of mathematical formula for us to even guess from. So we are basically stuck to arbitrary to the Fed's decision. Now, because of that arbitrary Fed decision with no mathematical formula to figure out average inflation rate, we have to listen to their words and what it is that they are saying within their speeches, in their talks, in order to grasp what it is that they are truly trying to say. Because what they're truly thinking, what they're truly saying is purposeful. right? That what they are doing is giving out those credible threats. They're giving out that forward guidance, and they're doing it in such a way to keep the markets very confused, right? And that's their intent. They want to be able to put out there in the mainstream media, through the corporate media, a particular narrative that then gets the markets to react. And it does work. Just look at it. I mean, the Federal Reserve is sitting on their hands. They have done nothing to change anything about the way they have changed anything about their monetary policy over the last few weeks. However, everybody who is like anticipating that there's going to be lower interest rates into the future started making moves as if that was almost guaranteed, right? That action begins to have an effect on the economy as if the Fed had actually done something. So their monetary policy literally is their words. They can make the economy or get the economy, the people within it, the markets, all the decisions that people start making, they can literally get them to start acting or reacting to those words, and and the results would be as if they had done something when they did nothing at all, right? And recognizing this is like, it's a lot easier now once we kind of figure out the strategy. If you didn't know this strategy, you would never have seen it. You would never see it at all. It would be completely blind to you. But understanding that that's what they're doing, a lot of people on this channel, when we started talking, when we talk about the credible threats, and the Fed made that statement that they were going to be lowering rates into the future, everybody knew exactly what it was. They knew it was a credible threat and how the markets reacted to it. Some people, they didn't see it that way. All right, I'm going to read through some of these comments and then we'll get into speech. Oh my gosh, look how many people. Wow, look at all these new people who have joined in. Thank you so much. Look, we got Zach and Sean and Leotis. I'm sorry. Jamal and Jeremy. Right on. Thank you, guys. That is so cool. I'd never seen so many people join in so quickly like that. That's awesome. You basically just need to keep your job. Many won't. Hence, downturn. Many won't waste money they aren't sure they will keep. Yep. Here I am. I heard it's $1 to join the stream, but it seems like I am here. Hey, right on. Didn't I make it members only? I don't know. Well, if it's not members only, cool, man. I'm glad you're here. I thought I had it for members only, but that's cool. If it's open to the public, awesome too, man. All right. Let's see here. Based. All right. Welcome everyone. I'm gonna be busy, but we'll be listening. All right, All-Nighter's doing work tonight, so he'll be here, but he won't be joining in on too much on the comments because he's busy doing his thing. Okay, I am self-employed and have 1-2 part-time jobs. Bidenomics works as long as you do. Yeah, I don't know what Bidenomics is. People talk to me about that all the time. I don't know. I've read through a lot of Federal Reserve speeches and monetary policies and, banking reforms. I've never seen anything that said Bidenomics or even described what the hell a Bidenomics is. Like, I don't think that exists. I don't know what that means. Like, that to me is like, I don't know, like some foreign language or something. I don't know what that means. All right. Hello, everyone. Smoke that like button like Cheech and Chong. Yes, please do. All right. Messages that appear from here, people who have purchased the content. Oh, I see. So that must have been an earlier message there. All right. Got KK who has a waving sticker. Hi, all from Dan. Dishes. Hey, everybody, hit the like button. Calling 9 on the dice. Hi, Dishes. Evening. Hi, Rocco. All right. Speaking of economy stuff to start 2024, how about the focus on the child tax credit? I don't know. Like, a lot of people, I guess that would probably be pretty important to, like, the individual out there. But again, like, a lot of these things, like the taxes, the stimulus packages, all that other stuff, this is the government's reaction to the economic forces that are happening out there. I mean, I don't think a lot of people realize how bad the situation really is. Now, I don't mean to be the doom and gloomer and trying to tell you that the rich are leaving us behind. Right? I mean, the separation between the rich and the poor is going to grow dramatically worse. And if there isn't stimulus packages handed out there, or if there isn't some sort of taxing or credit or tariff or whatever, then what'll end up happening is the economic forces that are out there will begin to deteriorate what it is that we have going on. I mean, I don't know how, or maybe enhance what we got going on. I guess it depends on the position that you put yourself in. So when I think about like a lot of these government reactions that are going on out there, like, people are like, how is this going to impact the economy? Well, they're acting that way because of the impact of the economy, right? This is why they're going out there and doing these things. We will find a time, if this continues and they're able to hold the system together and the dollar remains, viable and all that other stuff, we're going to go into the future finding the separation between the rich and the poor. They're going to have no other choice but to do constant money injections. They're going to be like force feeding us money, saying, hey man, you have to go spend this stuff. And like, I think about it, it's hard to explain it like just so quickly and simply, but this is one of the reasons why I feel like a central bank digital currency or some kind of digital currency is going to come into existence, and they're going to have like not only like direction that you can spend the money, time delay, um, you know, the manipulation of the direction of the money will be so fine-tuned through central bank digital currencies. This will make the central bankers like wet dream. Like they will be like, man, we got this total control over everything. We could force money in this direction, put a time limit on it, make it not be allowed to go in other directions. I mean, this is like, it's kind of scary stuff, but yeah, I see that it's coming, and it's the only way I think they can actually hold the system together is by doing something like that. Technology today has definitely made things a lot different when it comes to the economic impacts that are out there. Wow, 37 people and 37 likes. I love it. This is a great live stream. We got a lot of people up in here tonight. It's awesome to see so many members. Okay, starting 24. Hail night, let's rock steady. This isn't a game. It's not about being fair. Yeah, freaking king shit. Well, it's not, right? I mean, this is like, if I think about it. If you were out there in the wild and you were a lion, right, and you got this pile of meat in front of you, are you going to be sharing it with that other lion over there? It's all for you, man. I mean, you might share it if you think but if they're going to take it from you, hell no, you're going to fight for that stuff. It's all yours, right? Every bit of it, take it all. And that's survival, man. I mean, it was just like, oh man, no, I know there's a lot here, and I guess we could all share. I don't need it all for myself. Bullshit. Right? It's survival. You take it all. You go out there and you get all of it, as much as you can. You know who really has the best attitude when it comes to this stuff kind of things is commercial fishermen. Like, I don't, it's so funny. Like, I've gone out commercial fishing a couple of times when I was younger, but you see it not only in commercial fishing, but just about anything. Like, you'll see guys get into it when they're in it, when you're in the catch, when you're in the moment, right? It's like you start taking, right? And you take, and then pretty soon it's like you don't even know how much you're taking anymore. You're just taking it all. You're going to take it like as much as you can, and you're not going to stop until you have gotten as much as you possibly can get out of it, and then you'll figure out how much you got. Right? And it's something weird that happens within guys, within men. I mean, I don't know, maybe women do it too, but I've definitely seen it happen within men. And I know what it is all about. It's this instinctual thought that's within you to say, man, I need to get all this stuff because I got to take it back to the tribe. I got to take it back to, to the people, my people back home. Right? And you don't know how much you need. And it doesn't matter how much, as long as you bring a lot, because if you bring a lot, you're a hero. Right? That's survival. That's the survival instinct. And if you go against that, then you're not going for your full potential of what it is that you can get out there. All right, moving on. Let's read some comments. But it's not meant to be fair, and it's not a game. It's survival, and you got to go for it. Buying when there's blood in the streets is also feeling someone's need to sell for liquidity. That's right. I mean, that's like somebody's selling is meaning they're needing to get out, right? I mean, divorce, death, destitution, whatever it is, right? Somebody's going to get that. It might as well be you, right? You can be, that poor old lady or whatever, she's going to end up losing that house. I can't be the one who takes it or whatever. It was like somebody's going to get it, right? I mean, it sucks for her, right? Yes, it does, right? Maybe you can do something to help her out or whatever. But somebody's going to get that house. Why not you? I mean, is it being a vulture? Sure, I guess. Why not? I mean, If you want to give it that sort of meaning, I wouldn't. I would give it the meaning. It was like, man, that's opportunity. Somebody's going to get it. Why not me? I mean, just because they don't know who the old lady is means that they feel better and therefore it's okay for them and not for you because you know who she is. I mean, what difference does it make, right? It's the meaning that you're giving it. And that's really what it's important about. It's like, that's survival, Leo. All right. It's not just the 2% over time. It is them not stating what they are using for calculations. Exactly. And that is very difficult to try and say, yes, this is what the Federal Reserve is going to do. And I'm thinking, no, you can't. I read a lot of this stuff, and you cannot possibly tell me that this is what the Federal Reserve is planning on doing, since they do not give us their plan. Right? I mean, they give us an idea. They kind of tell us what it is that they're trying to do or whatever, but they don't give us like, okay, so if you take, and fill in these boxes with these numbers, it'll give you the average inflation rate. They don't do that, like, at all. All right, it's great to see 42 likes up in here with 33 people. Thank you for joining in. I hope you guys are having fun. Can someone explain how the low inflation expectation raises the real interest rate? Great question, Dan. I should have covered that. Okay. That one was very difficult for me to wrap my head around, but I'm going to try and explain it really simply here for you. And we're just going to basically take, like, imagine yourself as an investor who's going to get a 2% return, right? So whatever investment that you're going to put your money towards, it's going to pay you 2%. But you have an inflation expectation of 1%, right? So the real interest rate that you are going to receive is 1%. The amount that you get after inflation. If you can lower the inflation expectation, you will raise the real interest rate. So lower the inflation expectation to 0, you will raise the real interest rate to 2%. You see how that works? So this is the real interest rate. When you lower the inflation expectation, you can raise the real interest rates. Now, take it back to 2019, right? Maybe even a little bit earlier. It's probably even late 2018, somewhere in there. The Federal Reserve was raising interest rates, and I guess that was in 2018, right? They started raising interest rates, and it was pissing everybody off. Like, everybody was upset with the idea that the Federal Reserve was going to be raising rates, or was raising rates, not going to be, was raising rates. Donald Trump was out there screaming at one point, right? Because the Federal Reserve got it up to around 2.5%, and the markets were not well. The financial markets were like being very pissed off about that. And loans and difficulty and mortgages and stuff like that started to present themselves. It wasn't like dramatic in any way, but definitely noticed within the Economist, like especially out there on YouTube. I mean, like I was included. There was all kinds of people, especially in 2019, screaming inflation, talking about how the Federal Reserve was, lowering their interest rates. But prior to that, right, when they got their interest rates up to 2.5%, and it started pissing the markets off, the financial markets, they wanted to keep the interest rates elevated. They wanted to keep raising those interest rates, right? But they couldn't do it. But we know that the real interest rates come from inflation expectations. So Donald Trump went out there onto the media and he started screaming, there's no inflation. The Fed should be printing money. I want to fire Jerome Powell. That dude doesn't know what he's doing. The Fed should be printing money, taking interest rates into negative territory. There's no inflation. There's no inflation. There's no inflation. There's no inflation. Right? Lower the inflation expectation, started raising the real interest rates. That was the point of all that. Right? Now, let's go back to what John Williams said about it, right? When policy is constrained by the effective lower bound, the downward shift in inflation expectation raises the real interest rates, further diminishing the degree of monetary stimulus. Right? So if there's monetary stimulus out there and you have low inflation expectation, it diminishes the degree of that stimulus. Right? So here the government's trying to stimulate, but if they have a low inflation expectation, that stimulus is less effective. Why? Why would that happen? That doesn't make any sense. Well, let's try this again. You just got a bunch of stimulus money. Okay? You got it in your hand right now. You got a big chunk of stimulus money. Right? And you've been just given an inflation expectation that is extra hot. You think that the prices going into the future are like going to be extremely high. Motivated with money right now, stimulus money. What are you going to do? Let's get out there and start spending this stuff, right? So now you're spending the money because you believe that the inflation coming into the future is going to be destroying your purchasing power. Now it's increasing the degree of monetary stimulus that is happening out there. So literally, this was a mind trick by the whole system here in order to give you a stimulus check, give you the inflation, not even give you, I mean, present the inflation expectations to be running extra hot, right? Sever the supply chain, give you a bunch of stimulus money, right? Create the inflationary scenario. And now we have a high inflation expectation with the stimulus at the same time, increasing the degree of monetary stimulus. You see how this worked? You see, this was it was a ploy, and it totally worked, right? I mean, it's hard to see it at the time. It's easy to recognize it after the fact, right? We go back and we look at it and we're like, yeah, that's exactly how it went down, right? At the time, it's very difficult because we were thinking all kinds of other things were happening out there. You know, the entire world was coming undone, and people thought that there was no return from that we were going to go into a hyperinflation snenario and that, you know, everything was going to be like completely destroyed. I was one of the few people out there going, no, the Federal Reserve they needed this scenario, this whole hyperinflation scenario. They needed the people to believe that in order to get their monetary policy to become effective again, right? I mean, it's just like, it's all right there. Like I said, I'm going to make John Williams wish he never wrote this speech. Right? Okay, you guys having fun? So I hope that helped, Dan. I because I know that one was like, it's very difficult to wrap your head around the whole, like, you know, lowering interest rates, you know, inflation expectation raises the real interest rates. Just saying it is very difficult. But once you kind of understand what it is, like if you take that investor with the 2% return, then you kind of grasp it, and then you can understand how it is that by raising the inflation expectation, it increases the degree of monetary stimulus by motivating people to go out there and spend that money early. All right, I misspoke. The lower interest rate restricts the Fed, so it acts and then tricks the markets. Yeah. Just like the TV and MSM COVID and vaccines. Listening on the commute home. Right on, Tom. Thank you very much for being here. Every president gets worse and worse with every one of them. Well, that's the thing about these presidents and stuff. I don't really have much. I don't take in much input from them, right? Like the whole Bidenomics or whatever. Like, I don't know what that means. Like I could not even begin to describe a single thing when it comes to Bidenomics. I have no clue about that whatsoever. Like somebody who says, here, write down everything you know about Bidenomics, I would be like, blank piece of paper. You know, there you go. I don't know nothing about it, right? Because I mean, it's not important to me. What's important to me is monetary policy and the people who are in charge of that, the people who are making decisions on that stuff. That's important to me because that's the stuff that I can use, right? Somebody was just like, oh man, did you see all the tariffs they put out there on there? It's like, what difference does that make to me? Right? I mean, yeah, I know it's like has an impact on the economy and all the prices and all that stuff. There's nothing I can do within my own decisions that says, man, that tariffs has got me changing the way that I'm doing my strategy. Right? Like the way I'm not investing, like I'm going into crypto. I mean, that doesn't change anything about the way I do stuff, right? It is an impact that I have to internalize, right? And just kind of take it in with all the rest of the information out there. But as far as changing the way that I feel that, you know, how the monetary policy strategies or anything else like that, that's a long run goal. And it, like the other impacts that have with it, they're just that. They're impacts that don't really change the way that the economic forces are done, right? I mean, as far as like the Federal Reserve and their reactions to them and actions, all that stuff is, I mean, it's so hard to describe because it's so many people like look for the answer or look for the reasons or the cause, right? They're like, man, this singular thing is it. Right? I've been looking for that one key thing, and there I found it. It was the one piece that finally put it all together for me. It doesn't go down like that. Believe me, it doesn't. I have been studying this stuff for a long time, looking for that magic secret. There is no magic secret. It doesn't exist, right? What it is exactly what we're doing here. We're internalizing this information for ourselves because what it is that you're going to do with your life is going to be so much different from me and mine, right? If you're 80 years old trying to hold on to a retirement, or if you're 18 years old trying to figure out how to establish and start a retirement, the decisions that you make right now, considering the current situation, is going to be completely different from each other, right? That's why it's so important to internalize this stuff for ourselves. All right. Moving on here. What's your perspective on monetary policy, rate changes, etc., and lag rate of the impacting economy? I've read anywhere between 6 months and 12 years with forward guidance and credible threats speed up. Yeah. Now, I do agree that there is a lag time from the time that the Federal Reserve raises their interest rates to the time that they actually, those adjustments to the monetary policy, to the time they actually impact the economy. There is a lag. And I think that lag is really really subject to the part of the economy that you're looking at. It also has a lot to do with the forward guidance, just like what I was saying, when the Fed makes a statement and the people start to act as if the Fed had already done something, and that has the same impact on the economy before the Fed actually does anything. That forward guidance right there shortens up the lag time. So if they say, hey, we're going to raise our interest rates, in the next 6 months or whatever, or possibly in the next 6 months, and people begin to act on that information as if the Fed is raising rates in the next 6 months, and then the Fed actually does raise rates, say 6 months down the road, well, they've already had the markets behaving as if they raised rates prior to that. So it shortens up that lag time, that from the time that the Fed says something or changes their monetary policy to the time that it actually impacts the economy. That lag time can shorten up a lot with their forward guidance. Now, a lot of times, when we think about this, it can be anywhere from 6 months to a year to, even, I've heard 18 months to 2 years. I've never heard 12 years down the road. I think that might be a little far out for monetary adjustments to finally impact the economy, but I guess there's probably parts of it that would be affected by it 12 years down the road. But most of the time, I believe that like interest rates adjustments usually are having their full impact 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, somewhere in there down the road, depending on what part of the economy you're looking at. So yeah, there is a lag, and it is shortened up with the credible threats. So yeah, I would definitely take that into consideration, when it comes to like how much lag time there is. That's one of the things, like, people say, oh, just give us some time, man. The housing market, mortgage market, stuff like that hasn't felt the effects of the Fed funds rate yet. And I'm like, no, I think they have. Like, the Fed started raising rates and the mortgage market shot up right away. Like almost instantly. Found their peak almost instantly, right? Bounced around up there at the high, but hadn't kept pace, like that lockstepping pace with the Federal Reserve. As the Fed was incrementally like raising interest rates, the mortgage rates were just staying consistent. They fluctuated a little bit, but they weren't going up with the Fed. They had shot up and plateaued off. That tells me right there, right, that things are not keeping up with the Fed, that they found their own spot, right? And that's where, like, the lag that a lot of people are thinking, because the Fed was raising rates and then peaked out, they're thinking from that point, right, whenever they peaked out, that the lag would be coming from there. To me, it's not. Like, the mortgage market moved up right away, and so from that point, right, that's when we start seeing the impact hitting the housing market, which is now going on, almost 2 years, right, since the raising of interest rates started to take place. When's it going to have its full impact on the housing market? 4 years down the road? 6 years down the road? 12 years down the road? When does it actually start to impact the housing market in a dramatic way where it crashes the housing market? I don't see it, right? I don't see that happening now. So, yeah, that lag time is definitely shortened up with the forward guidance credible threats. All right. Moving on here. Okay. Boy, I'm going to get reading all these comments. I'm not going to be able to get to the speech. Okay, let's see. What time is it? Okay, we're 39 minutes into it. We got to get the speech into it. Okay. I've been trying to figure this stuff out for years. Coming across UE a couple of years ago started to shed some light on the economic mystery. $1 a month to enlightenment. Hey, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And that's really what this is all about. It's just trying to figure this stuff out for ourselves, right? We can listen to people all day long talk about how the Federal Reserve is here to destroy your life. Okay, that's great. Now let's figure out how their strategy is working so I can do something about this, right? Because if I'm just sitting around thinking that they're coming after to kill me, then I'm not going to be able to make good decisions for myself about what it is or the appropriate decisions for myself because I'm going to live in this like fear of the Fed kind of thing. I'm not going to do it because there's no way you can thrive in that kind of environment. Thriving comes from understanding what it is that you are at and so that you can best position yourself for it. And I think that's really what we do here. I mean, I'm breaking this stuff down in a way that like I don't think anybody else is. You know, like I am internalizing this because I want to be able to like I would love to be able to walk into a Fed meeting and sit there and understand everything that they are talking about and then ask them questions, you know, and it's just like, okay, well, you got this whole like average inflation rate thing going and you got the whole markets confused believing that you're going for a 2% target. So tell me, how does that work for you when you got the markets believing a 2% target, but you're going for a 2% average inflation rate? So like me personally know that you're, screwing with the markets. How do you guys like work that in your system? Like, I would love to understand that, ask a question like that. Like to me, I don't know if anybody really asked that kind of question, because I think that's probably the most important part for us to understand where it is that the Federal Reserve is going to move. If we all think that they're going for a 2% target and they're not even thinking about a 2% target, then we got them completely wrong. I know that, right? I know that's when I recognize from other economists and other people out there in the corporate media. It's just like, you guys keep saying this 2% target. You're so wrong. You're so wrong on that. And it makes it very difficult to understand anything that they have to say as far as like, their viewpoints or their understanding of it or what they, their possible predictions or something like that. It just makes it's just like, dude, it's all invalid now because you believe that there's a 2% target as opposed to saying, no, the Fed's going for a 2% average. Nobody says it like that, And so therefore, it's like the rest of their strategy, I'm thinking, man, I don't know if I can trust that, All right. Let's see here. Thanks for the info. You bet, David. Thanks for being here. Deja vu. It's great to see you. Enjoy your money. Otherwise, you'll chase it. Yes, don't chase money. Right? Money should be chasing you. Put yourself in a situation in which that your skills are valuable and you put out 51% value, right? That's what you're looking for because the other 49% should be returning in abundance, right? If you put out there value, you're putting out something that's valuable to people, and that's what I'm trying to do here on this channel. I break this stuff down. I'm discussing it in a way that I think that the average person could try and like at least wrap their heads around so that they can make that decision for themselves. I think that's valuable information. I wish somebody had done that for me when I was, trying to figure out why I was losing my house and going into foreclosure. It would have been nice to have somebody explaining things to me other than the Fed's there to kill you. I mean, I just I knew the Fed was going to destroy my life back then, right? I mean, and the Fed, total Ron Paul fan, got into The Creature from Jekyll Island, all the stuff, man. I'm still a Ron Paul fan. I'm still a G. Edward Griffin fan. I'm like, I'm all that stuff. But I'm not taking on the idea anymore that these people are after me, right? I'm not doing that anymore. Puts you in a survival mode. It makes you run. It's like, it's not a place that you can grow from, right? So understanding their strategy is much better position to be in, and understanding it in a way that's like almost as good as they know allows you to say, man, I don't, you guys are talking crazy out there with all this stuff. I mean, I'm making the decision based on the things that I know coming from the Federal Reserve, not what this corporate media, which is obviously propaganda, is telling us. All right. Very Rick of you. All right. We are survivalists living in consumerist society. Expand your domain, yeah, but very important to find your tribe. Absolutely. You guys and gals are a bunch of cool-ass mother... Yep, absolutely. I don't even need to mod this chat with so many responsible adults here. Yeah, and that's really, again, why I feel that these membership-only chats or live streams within the chat is so much... It's so valuable here because we are not just screwing around. We are really trying to figure this out seriously, and not just somebody saying, oh man, you're just a fear monger, you're just going for clicks, you're just going for all that other stuff. We don't need those people. right? I mean, don't get me wrong. There's probably some good, valuable information within everybody, who's studying this stuff. But when we're trying to figure this thing out, we don't need a bunch of, like people trolling and stuff. Like, I mean, whatever, they're trolls, but we don't have time for this, right? We have a very limited amount of time, and we don't have time to screw around. We have time to figure things out so that we can be serious about this. All right, you better keep us in check, or maybe just me. Great call on the commercial fisherman going crazy. Been there many times. Yeah, absolutely. Like, All Nighter knows that because he's a commercial fisherman himself. But I've seen it. Like, once you're in it, you're just as much as you can. You're not even thinking like there could be 1,000 fish or 10,000 fish behind you. You don't care. You're getting another one. You're gonna get another and another and another. Right? It's just this weird, like, it's almost like this, almost like psychotic. I mean, I'm not even sure quite what the word is for it. It's like you just like the whole world is gone, and all you got is the next fish, Simon, do you really think the Fed chair is selected by politicians? Well, I mean, okay. I mean, if you're asking me the question, if I think there's an honest flow of people moving into these positions, no, not at all. Like, there is no way. There's no way that an individual like me would ever make it into a position at the Federal Reserve, no matter how hard I study. I could study and read and memorize every single thing that has ever been written by the Federal Reserve and every statement they had ever made, and know it by heart and know it better. But I'm not in the right family. I didn't have the right network growing up. I didn't rub shoulders and make deals and partnerships and all this other stuff from all the experiences that my families and the people around me had, right? Like, you have to grow up in this industry. You are conditioned from a child to take part inside of this higher elitist group. I don't even want to call them elitist, but that's essentially what it is. They're not, they're separate from us. Right? We are real people, they're everybody else. The separation between the rich and the poor, if you can get on that other side of that wedge, like that upper wedge up there, you might be able to meet them and hang out with them or stuff like that, but you will never be part of their family, right? You'll never be part of their network. The chances of you moving in there are very slim, right? And so, no, I don't think that they are elected. I think these people grew up into these positions. Now, whether this particular person is like, man, we selected you when you were 12 years old, that one day you would be in charge. No, I mean, I don't think it goes down like that. But the selection of people that they do pick from, right, they're within that network, right? They're within that community of people. And you have to basically grow up within that in order to be there. It's not something you can just enter into, All right. My wife and I finally got out of debt in 2023. Awesome. I've been watching people like you, Simon, so I can better figure out what to do financially. Well, thank you. What is that? TurboGrafx 7. Thank you so much. This is exactly like the type of this is the type of response that I'm looking for, out of this. People who are looking to make these decisions for themselves, they know that they are in a position that is unique, right? They know they're not like their neighbor. They know they're not like their brother or sister. They know they're not like, everybody else that's going on out there and wondering. They need to make this decision. They need to figure out, do I buy the house? Do I invest in retirement? Do I sell the house? Like, what do I do? By internalizing this stuff, it just intuitively becomes like natural to understand what it is that you need to do next. You're not guessing, all right? You're not like wondering, okay, it was just like, well, what does this YouTuber say? Should I sell my house or not? Maybe what does that YouTuber say? Should I sell? Like, you're not looking at it like that. I mean, you might be looking at the YouTuber going, wow, that's an interesting perspective. I've never thought about it like that. That might be another way to look at it, but you're not looking for them to tell you what it is that you need to do. You are making your own decisions based on the understandings that you have, right? Zero expectations on somebody else, right? but the expectations you have on your own understanding. So much, it's actually relieving, right? A lot of times, if you don't do this and you're out there looking for, you're looking at the next video, the next article, and you're just like, man, what is it, man? Give me, and pretty soon you got all this information and you don't know, and you're twisted and following Bidenomics, whatever the hell that is, and you just like it just out there. I put it all in line, figure it all out, start understanding the Fed strategy, and things start making a lot more sense. Yeah, buddies, at work with my ears on. Right on. Thank you, Midwest Cannabis, for being here. Low inflation expectations nullify Fed stimulus efforts. So they need higher inflation expectations for their stimulus to have any effect. That is so accurate in your statement right there. See how we're doing this, right? Internalizing that for ourselves. Now we get it. Like when those stimulus packages come out, at the same time we put out a lot of they put out a lot of inflation expectation narrative out there in the mainstream media, and then boom, right? Their stimulus is more effective on the economy. Debt sucks. Congrats, bro. That's awesome. Yeah, it is. That's the point. Keep it open-ended so it will end up exactly how they needed it. Maintain credibility. Otherwise, forward guidance won't work in the future. That's it. All right. Dan, thanks. The house was the last big thing we paid, and it felt amazing to get it off our backs. Yeah, I bet. All right. Midwest Cannabis. All right, you guys are all here. Okay. Question. Hey, Simon. Great info. Happy to be a new member. Well, thank you, Eli. Thank you for joining in. My question is what your thoughts on how higher and longer interest rates will affect the crypto market? Very interesting, Eli. So the crypto market is a very unique one that I don't really look at as far as like the bigger macroeconomic picture. Like I don't think about how Bitcoin is going to be providing liquidity or being used as a world reserve currency or anything like that. I would think with higher interest rates, right? Something to try and consider is that people have a tendency to move in a particular direction, right? So if you can get a return on capital investment, meaning like getting an interest rate return, then most likely you're going to be moving into something like that, right? But then if you get the speculative idea, like prices are going to be moving up on something, then you end up moving into like those speculation type things. So there's two different things that are happening here. You got investments and speculation, right? A lot of times you can buy things that are an investment that end up turning into a speculation. Like you buy a house with the intent on renting it, but then all of a sudden, the value of the house goes way up and you sell it, right? And so you end up going for the asset price as opposed to the continual rental income, right? So now let's think about like interest rates, how that affects the crypto market. Well, I guess that would depend on what is happening that's causing those interest rates to rise or fall at the time, right? Because if you are sitting in a situation in which that you have like liquidity crisis, like there's full on liquidity crisis taking place where nobody's finding the dollars, interest rates are skyrocketing, people are panicking everywhere, you might find at that time cryptocurrencies falling crazy, gold crazy, going down, down, right? Not making any sense, except that people are looking for the liquidity where they can find it, and you have to sell off your assets in order to find those dollars to pay off your debts that you have. So if there's like a liquidity crisis taking place where like people are scrambling for dollars, looking for cash anywhere that they can find it, then you may find that people will be selling off their cryptocurrencies at any price to get a hold of that cash. Those interest rates rising at the time would be reflective of the bond market selling off, right? So as the bond prices are going down, the yields are rising, so you would see those interest rates going up during that time. So it would really depend on what is going on at the time that would be causing those interest rates to rise. Now, if people are going for the safe haven part of things, like they're not necessarily concerned about like a particular event that's causing, this panic feeling, right? Because most of the time when there's like crisis, war, major turbulence, people want to get into cash, get into the US dollar as quickly as possible. But let's say like some of those things aren't taking place and we just have high interest rates at the time, right? Well, there very well could be a situation in which that people are moving in to cryptocurrencies, moving into gold, moving into even the dollar at the exact same time, because they don't know where to go with their own money within their own nation. So it may not even be within the United States itself, but somebody outside of the United States who is just concerned about interest rates rising, they're concerned about their own money and within their own nation, and they start moving into cryptocurrencies, gold or the dollar, in order to protect themselves from their own sovereign nation or own sovereign currency. There's a lot to think about, right? I mean, if interest rates go up, it doesn't necessarily say this is what's going to impact the crypto market. There's a lot of conditions out there that's causing the interest rates to rise that may have people fearful of liquidity crisis or fearful of their own sovereign nation or something. So there's two different scenarios right there would make it go one way or the other, even though the interest rates would go up. You kind of see what I'm saying? It's like one doesn't necessarily cause the other. Yeah. Did I explain all that right? I kind of feel like I babbled through that. All right. Got out of debt, back in debt, had to buy a 2003 Chevy Tahoe, transmission from AutoZone. Betting I won't have to buy a vehicle for at least 10 years. Good for you. Money is gas for your car. You need it to go places, but it's madness to drive around, just fill up at gas stations. It feels madness to just drive around just to fill up at gas stations. Oh, I see what you're saying. Like just drive around without any purpose to it. Yeah. Not sinking the boat is the only reason we pull the net when it's getting plugged with fish. Yeah, and I've seen like, man, this guy Michael, I know everybody calls him Captain Bub. He's a big, huge dude. He brought one of his tuna boat back one time, and I don't know how the thing was still floating. Like, I mean, like I could have swore most of the boat was underwater. Like, like I don't know how it didn't sink. Like he brought it in. Like I don't think you could have put one more fish on that boat. I don't think you could have. Yeah. All right. Simon, don't know a ton of your background, but why do you mostly focus on Fed policy for making choices like laws, prices, the weather, random accidents, customers, etc. must affect lumber industry? No, yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of impacts. I mean, wildfires and, all floods and stuff like that. All kinds of things impact the lumber market. But very rarely are you going to find anything out there beyond the monetary policies that are going to have the profound impact on your life that makes a difference. All right. And so like I guess what I mean by that is that there's a flood up in British Columbia and it completely takes out the rails and the highways and a bunch of mills, and 20% of the softwoods that are imported into the United States come from Canada, and better than 50% of that comes from British Columbia. So they have a major, major impact on the economy. So it did, right? I mean, a couple years ago, we had these major floods, and it had an impact on the lumber prices for some time as those issues were present, right? Eventually it cleared up and then the lumber prices went back to their normal. So during that short amount of time, yeah, you might have issues within it, but it doesn't have any kind of long lasting, impacts to it. What does have long lasting impacts is the monetary policy strategies, right? So yes, you might have like certain things that take place that have a major impact at the moment, right? But there's greater economic forces and timelines to look at that are more likely going to be very clear in where it is that these things are going to. Like, it's not just a matter of just understanding the lumber market as far as the futures price. It's also understanding that the British Columbia area is very impactful. They are high cost, like high input cost, high output producers, right? So they are sensitive, very sensitive. Price fluctuations, environmental conditions, anything that happens up there has an impact within the lumber market, right? So being focused in on the British Columbia area when it comes to lumber is very reasonable. Here's the problem with it is those mills, that particular area is depleting. And those mills are moving down to the southern part of the United States, right? So this is kind of interesting to think about. Canadian companies, Canadian mills, right, hit with all these tariffs, not only by Biden, but by Trump and all this other stuff, have decided that the British Columbia area is not the place they want to be anymore, but instead, these Canadian mills are setting up shop down here in the United States. So Canadian-owned mills are bypassing tariffs, right, cutting our trees and selling them to us. Isn't that pretty interesting, right? So understanding like the lumber market has all kinds of channels, all kinds of avenues to look at, all kinds of stuff. So it's not just looking at monetary policy, right? It's understanding the industry within itself as well. Like if I didn't know all this stuff, then I wouldn't have been able to call it the market just by looking at the Fed, right? There's no way. But understanding the Federal Reserve, their monetary policies, and then understanding the position that I was in, looking at lumber, doing retail sales, being in a community that does timber, that has mills, has truck drivers. I know wholesalers, I know mill operators. I was speaking with mill managers up in British Columbia. I mean, there was no angle of the market that I couldn't see. So the understanding of macroeconomics that I had gave me the understanding of what was taking place within the lumber market so profoundly that I was able to accurately call out just about everything that was taking place within it, right? So that's where like I don't need to focus in on like environmental impacts on it. I need to understand the monetary policy strategies, and then I need to understand the industry from my own perspective, right? Like I couldn't do this with cars, right? Like I don't know anything about cars. Like I hardly even know how to work on cars. I certainly don't know anything about assembling cars or distribution of cars or anything else that comes down to cars. There's no way that I would have been able to do the things that I did inside of the lumber industry to transfer that over to cars, unless I happen to be in the car automotive industry in some way, right? Then I might have had a shot at it. So again, like looking at this stuff and understanding it for yourself, if you understand the economic forces for yourself, if you understand the monetary policies for yourself, then when you're looking out there and people are saying, oh man, this is Biden's fault, you can be like, bro, come on now, buddy, right? This is not that, right? It's the way I was able to call out like, lumber in all kinds of ways, saying, no, it's not money printer, right? This is supply chain breakdown. This is lack of inventory. All this stuff is going to fade away and change. And I can confidently and accurately say that because I knew what was taking place within the Federal Reserve and I knew what was taking place within my own industry. So I didn't need to look at anything else. Like I mean, I really didn't. Like anything outside of that didn't really have as much impact as the things that I was looking at. All right, moving on here. My guess is because they rapidly change policy and they always do in response to something. How is the stimulus more effective when the Fed sets higher inflation expectations? They don't set higher inflation expectations. Right? They don't set that. That comes from the perception of the people believing that there's going to be inflation expectations coming. That is due to media propaganda, right? Otherwise, most people wouldn't even understand how monetary policy works without the media putting it out there going, you believe in inflation, you believe inflation, there's inflation, you believe it, right? Otherwise, most people probably wouldn't even know. Like they would be like, what the hell's quantitative easing? Like they wouldn't know that that would cause inflation. They have no clue of what that is, right? But if it's blasted through the media and they're showing, look at the price of eggs, oh my God, and they're like, like I had people, this is what's funny to me, is that when the price of eggs went up, I had people like come to the lumberyard wanting to build chicken coops because they could no longer afford to eat because of the price of eggs. And I'm like, how many eggs do you eat? Like, how many eggs could you possibly eat that is going to be driving you into the poorhouse to the point that you need to raise your own birds. Besides, you don't even make you barely break even between the feed and the care of the birds. You barely break even on eggs. This doesn't make sense to me, right? And I was just like, and I had so many people tell me this, like, oh, I can't afford, I can't afford these eggs or whatever. And I'm thinking I mean, they're expensive comparatively to what they were, but it's not like your entire life comes to a screaming halt because of the price of eggs, right? But yet, all these people were coming into the lumberyard looking to build chicken coops, looking to deal with these eggs issues, doing all that other. And I was like, man, this is all going to go away before too long, right? This is the bullwhip effect taking place. I recognize it completely, right? And sure enough, that's exactly what ended up happening, is that the price of eggs came down. But the mainstream media pushed it out there so bad, right? That avian bird flu is causing all this other stuff to happen, and it wasn't. Like, I mean, I did a video, talking just about this very thing. Even, shared a link to an egg farmer who was saying we are not replacing our hens, right? This isn't avian bird flu. We're like, a hen only lasts 2 years, like, even a year, 18 months, 2 years. And then the egg production really starts to dramatically fall. They have to constantly replace these birds, right? It's not like you just have a bird, they last 10 years or something like that. It doesn't go like that. Right? And so understanding, like, from this egg farmer's perspective that, hey, we're not getting paid. If I'm not getting paid, then I'm not going to replenish these hens. There's no point in investing back into new hens if I don't get the price that I want for these eggs. Right? And that was the problem that they were having at the time. The gap in production took place until the prices rose, the renegotiation of what these egg prices were going to be. Right? All of a sudden, all this investment goes into hens, and boom, there's too many eggs, right? And it's easy to see. Like, once you recognize the bullwhip effect, once you recognize some of the, like, the Cantillon, effect, you start to really, see that a lot of stuff that's taken place out there that people are blaming on one thing or the other is just natural economic forces, but nobody recognizes that. And so they start to react in a way that, then starts having, like, things like tariffs and, taxes and all the other stuff that ends up taking place because of that. All right. Okay, let's see, more effective when the stimulus or not spending. Let's see here. How is the stimulus more effective? Did I get that one? Okay. Expectations by the people spending or not spending, reducing their personal balance sheet. Please explain more detail. How is the stimulus more effective when the Fed sets higher inflation expectations by the people spending? It's not more. Oh, hold on, let me see about it. So, okay, so the stimulus is more effective when the people have higher inflation expectations, because they would make them more willing to spend their money today than to lose that money to the loss of purchasing power going into the future, right? So if the item that you're buying today is $20, but you think it's going to be $25 into the future, wouldn't you spend it today? Boom. Stimulus activity taking place, right? Now, if you didn't have that inflation expectation and you thought that it was going to be very low, then you might end up just holding on to your money and not spending it, right? So it doesn't make it effective. You would just like, I'm not too worried about inflation. I'm just going to stick it in the bank and keep it, right? That's not what they were looking for. They were looking for that stimulus to get out there and become more effective. And so if you can raise the inflation expectation, you will raise the real interest rates, right? Raising the inflation expectation, yeah. What you will do is you will lower the real interest rates, right? If you lower the real interest rates, so say, for example, here's a great one. I got my house for 3.25%, right? But if I believe that inflation is going to be 5% into the future, I can spend my money right now losing 3.25 as opposed to losing 5.25 going into the future. It's actually gaining a purchasing power by spending it now as opposed to going and spending it later on into the future, right? So you see how, like, this inflation expectation coming into the future gets people to spend their money today. And I think that's probably the easiest way to understand that part. All right. I got fish. All right, lots of egg suckers. Yeah. All right. Question: assuming a liquidity crisis with bonds happens and the Fed uses the Treasury's cash to buy up the bonds, I don't think the Fed would do that. Like the Fed doesn't make the decisions for the Treasury. Like the Fed can't go like, okay, Treasury, it's time for you to spend. I think the Treasury is like independent. They're acting on their own. I'm not saying they're not getting together saying, hey man, I'm going to do this, you do that. We're going to work together on other things. But the Fed doesn't come to the Treasury and say, okay, you do this, right? And I don't think the Treasury goes to the Fed and does that. I think they work together at times doing their thing, right? Now, I know that's kind of confusing for a lot of people to maybe it was just like, dude, 6 and 1, half and the other, they're the same thing. They're not, right? And it's very important to keep them separated so that we can understand them in a separate fashion. If you start put these things together, then the independence of the Federal Reserve and the understanding of them being independent starts to be clouded by the government actions of the Treasury, which is government, conducted and ruled. So there's definitely two different things that are happening there. So it's important to understand it in that fashion. Okay. So in the Feds uses the Treasury's cash to buy up the bonds, how would that affect regular Joe? It doesn't. Regular Joe won't be affected by it. But what's going to happen is that the mainstream media is going to be blasting a bunch of attention to it, and it's going to scare the shit out of you if you don't know what's going on, right? And that's how you'll be affected by it, right? They'll be talking about how there's a liquidity crisis within the bond market and the Treasury is stepping in buying these bonds, and it's because the whole world doesn't want to buy bonds, and that's why the Treasury is stepping into it. That might be a narrative that you hear. In fact, you're probably going to hear that exact narrative coming from a lot of YouTubers and, economists that are out there saying that this is a sign that the world is no longer appreciative of the U.S. treasuries and they are getting out. If they weren't doing this, then the Treasury wouldn't have to be stepping up and buying these bonds. That is not what I believe, but that is the narrative that you could hear out there. We know much differently right now that when we hear that they are wrong. Right? Because this has already been stated. They are already knowing that this event is coming, and it's not due to a spontaneous dumping of U.S. treasuries by foreign-held entities. Right? This is going to be important to understand because I can almost see it happening. I can almost hear the words already coming from the mainstream media for the blame on why the Treasury is buying back their bonds. It's almost inevitable at this point. And I don't know, that'll probably go down in history as the reason. And I don't think anybody within the Treasury or the Fed or the government is going to correct anybody's thinking of that. They probably just go ahead and let them think that. Because if they're thinking it wrong, right, then they don't know what the strategy is. And that's how they are able to get away with a lot of the stuff that they do, is by simply people just not being aware of it. Or even worse, thinking that the reason that it's happening is for something completely different. And they'll let them think it. It's like, go ahead and think that. That's awesome. As long as you don't know the real reason, we don't care, How can we practically apply the foresight from the Fed's actions in our own lives? That is a great question, okay? You have to internalize it for yourself because I don't know who you are. I don't know the goals that you have in your life. I don't know what it is that you are planning for your future. I don't know the position that you're in today. Do you have a family? Are you on your own? Do you plan on staying where you're at? Are you living in a, mom's basement? Are you renting an apartment? There is so much to know, right? And each individual person is going to be different. So internalizing this stuff and understanding what it is that the cause and effects from some of these things are going to be. I think about somebody who's like maybe let's just kind of just make something up on the fly. Let's say, for example, that during the pandemic and energy prices really started to move up, right? And you're looking at this and you don't understand quite what's happening, but all you see is that the price of fuel, the price of electricity, everything is moving up so dramatically, right? And you're scared. Right? You're scared because you're watching TV. All these people are talking about the end of the world. They're talking about hyperinflation. They're talking like stuff that you just don't know, right? Because, this stuff is confusing, right? So you're going to I know I'm going to buy solar panels. I'm going to load up on solar panels. That way I have enough electricity for myself, and maybe I could charge my car so I don't have to worry about fuel. I don't have to worry about that other stuff. I'm going to invest heavily into some solar panels for my house right now, right? And at the time, it could have been very, very expensive to do that. Like off the charts expensive. But you're feared. You don't know. You're thinking maybe in the future these solar panels may not even be available, or they might be twice as much as what they're selling for today. All right. So you load up on solar panels, you get a bunch of them, you get them all installed, you pay a high labor cost to get them installed, all that other stuff. You finally get them all up there. You're real happy with yourself because you made this huge investment into solar panels, and now you're off the grid, don't have to worry about power. And you went and opened up your news articles today, and you're reading about how there is this huge oversupply of solar panels, and they are dumping them cheap as hell. Can pick them up for pennies on the dollars comparatively to what they were. And you realize now that you have dumped a lot of money into something that you could have gotten for a fraction of the cost today. But because you didn't understand what was taking place at the time and you were fearful of the things that were occurring, you went and made this investment thinking it was the best decision for yourself, only to come to find out that you could have saved that money, invested that into something that was actually going to grow, and then bought the solar panels with that, just giving it some time to know that all this stuff was eventually going to fade away. But if you were so fearful of the future and the hyperinflation scenario and the energy running out, nobody would be able to have any, then you might have made decisions that weren't appropriate, right? I mean, they might have seemed at it at the time, and 6 and 1 and half of the other, or whatever. Hindsight's always 20/20, or whatever you want to say it. The point being is that if you had internalizing this information into a position in which that you're not paying attention to the media for your information, scaring the hell out of you, you'll probably be making more appropriate decisions, right? Just intuitively doing it because you understand it on a different level. And so that's why it's important. Like, I mean, there's no way that an individual, like there's no commentator on YouTube, there's no book that you can read, there's nothing out there, right, that's going to give you the answer. There is no magic secret. That's what I'm trying to say. It's a matter of taking in this information and internalizing it, and in knowing that the things that you are recognizing and seeing out there, the articles that you are reading. I read articles all the time where they perfectly describe, like right now you're seeing a lot of the bullwhip effect and stuff. I read articles, I see the bullwhip effect, like plainly described, right? Like almost perfectly described within it, but they don't recognize it. They don't know that bullwhip effect even exists, right? But yet they completely describe it. And that's what happened to me on the channel here. As I was describing some of the things that I was seeing, it was the comments, the viewers who were saying, dude, what you were describing is the bullwhip effect. Now, I had heard the bullwhip effect before, kind of knew a little bit about it, but when I went and started doing more research on it, I'm like, yes, this is exactly what is taking place right now within lumber. I recognize it now, and then I started recognizing it in other things as well. So again, like internalizing it for yourself then tells me that everybody on the media, everybody who was talking lumber, everybody who thought that they knew all those experts were wrong. Every one of them. And I didn't believe a single one of them the entire time. And I confidently did that because of the stuff that I had, internalized already, right? I knew that they were wrong. I just knew it. It didn't, like, I didn't even have to question it. It was like, I can't believe that they're even stating this, and we'll have a job after this because they are completely wrong, right? But, nobody knows that, And even still today, people don't know why lumber went up as high as it did. Like, people ask me all the time, how come that happened? And I'm like, God, I only put out 400 videos talking about it, but, okay. Yeah. All right. So I don't mean to be like, so like obscure on that answer, like what can we do to practically, but that's how you do it. Like you literally have to start step one. What's a bond? What's the dollar? What's central bank digital currencies? What's monetary policies? What is? If you don't know the answer to these things, it's literally like daily grind on what is, what is this stuff? I tried to bring up as much as I can, but even I don't know what it is that needs to be said out there. Like I have taken in so much information now that I don't even really know what's common knowledge and not anymore. I mean, I literally don't. Like, I start talking about bonds to people, and I forget that some people don't even know what the hell a bond is, let alone how one works. And then I realize, man, I have talked all this stuff about bonds, and they're completely glazed over, like have no clue. And I'm like, shit, I didn't even get that complicated yet, you know? And so again, just understanding it is really just a personal thing. Man, I don't know if I'm going to get to the speech. What is it? Hour and 20 minutes into this. Okay. Homestead farming is about resilience and savings. Prepping turns to farming. Yeah. Expecting a liquidity crisis, I'm holding on to cash, fixing my car instead of replacing it, buying more bonds and fewer stocks. Yeah, I agree. I think that's probably a pretty good position to be in, at least until the whole treasury bond buyback thing happens. Like, I am not really interested in buying into stocks. I do a little bit of dollar cost averaging, so I'm going to buy some regardless every other week. Like, it's just, I mean, I'm going to do it, but I'm not going to heavily put towards it because, I mean, that's one thing that I have found is that put something towards something every week, every other week, like consistently, even if you don't want to do it, like it doesn't feel good, like at least just go buy an ounce of silver or something, just one piece. Put something somewhere or have good intent with that cash. Don't just blow it. Like say, well, I am not buying something today, but I am definitely holding this cash for that moment when I do. So, and that's, you know, but I agree. Like I'm kind of sitting in the same position until the Treasury moves into that bond buyback program or whatever. I'm just going to be very nervous about putting a lot of money towards stocks or bonds or anything else out there because I think there's buying opportunity coming. Right on. We got 37 people still watching and 51 likes. I love it. All right. What's your 2024 financial goals based on the research so far? Drink water, stay hydrated. Yeah, that's my goal. Um, my financial goals are spanning much farther than just 2024. A lot of people, you know, already know my story, my backstory. I was basically broke and, you know, I was an alcoholic. I was broke. I had no money, no car, deeply in debt, and 40 years old, and nothing. Like that's the condition I was in. And the house that I was living in, my family was just like, they were frustrated with me and they're like, you got to get out of this house, right? So like I was like not doing well at all, like really not doing well. And it was the decision to change my life around, quit drinking, and then got motivated on this YouTube channel, and it really changed my life. So when it comes to like 2024 and what it is that I plan on doing what I have been doing. And that is to continue to save, to contribute to like what I would feel is going to be my retirement stock portfolio, crypto portfolio, stocks. I don't plan on making any kind of major move unless the opportunity really presents itself in a major way. Like, look at this property, man. You're in a position in which that you can get it. You should go for it. It's a great deal. Then I might take up on it. That's not necessarily something I'm looking for right now. What I'm looking for is to stay consistent on what it is that I have been doing and continue to plan on doing, and that is putting that security together, my retirement together, paying my house off. You know, I mean, a lot of people don't realize there's a lot of stuff that goes into a house. And if you are broke and haven't had a whole lot of stuff throughout your life, you move into a house, it's kind of empty, you know, and I gotta buy stuff for the house. Like, you know, I mean, we have old furniture, we got old things, and so like trying to fill a house is really expensive. Most people spend their life doing that. Like, I didn't have anything, right? So this is kind of some of the things that I have to move towards in order to have, like, you know, you don't want to live in an empty house, right? You want decent stuff, decent furniture, and, you know, all that other stuff. So like there's a long ways for me to go. I don't have like major plans to be like, oh, well, let's see here. I hope to earn $1 million in 2024, and then next year I'll earn $5 million. Like, you know, I don't have goals like that. You know, it'd be cool if that happened, but that's not like, I don't have any kind of goal like that going on, you know. My goal is to continue to build this YouTube channel up. I think this membership thing has really motivated me, got me inspired to try and put forth more information, more research. You know, it's really motivated me in a different way, giving me like a product that I can sell, right? And that's like really what I wanted. Like, I don't have a book, I don't have a program, I don't have all this other stuff, and the only way that I can really promote anything is for somebody else, is to be like, to take on a sponsorship or something. But selling this membership is like motivated me. Like, I love it. Like, I feel like this is the thing that really has the next direction for the channel. And so I'm just going with it because it feels good. All right. How could you have foreseen the solar panels going down? Okay. Great question, because that is exactly the way that you can see eggs going down or lumber going down or anything else because of the bullwhip effect. All right. Now, we have to understand there are certain things that are going to take place that is just going to cause humans to do things, right? There are certain triggers in human nature, right? One of them is the opportunity to dive in and get some money, right? Greed. So when we have a situation in which that there is a reduction in inventory, demand is up, right? Supply, demand, prices move, right? What happens? Prices go up because demand's much higher than the supply. Why was the supply down? Self-inflicted wound, right? Don't go to work, don't manufacture, don't distribute, don't care, all this other stuff, don't, lowers the supply, all right? Demand is saying, hey, I'm worried about hyperinflation. I'm worried about energy cost. I'm worried about all this other stuff. I want to be like free and independent. I want to get off the grid, whatever. Demand goes up, right? Now prices are quite elevated. The investor over there goes, ooh, prices, love it. Money going into building solar panels, right? Because I'm going to take advantage of these high prices as an investor and get my money out of this, right? But you're not the only one, right? There's other investors who see that too, but you don't know who they are. You don't even know they're doing it, right? You're just thinking, I see high prices in solar panels, I'm going to invest into solar panels. Next thing you know, you turn around and all these people have thought the same thing, invested in the solar panels, and boom, now we got an oversupply of solar panels, right? This is what's happened. This is what's taking place right now. Understanding the bullwhip effect ahead of time could see that when all of a sudden you got a dramatic fall in supply of solar panels, right there, all you have to say is, damn, the prices are going to move up if there's not a lot of supply, right? Next thing you see, prices moving up. Now you know, hell, this is the bullwhip effect starting in, right? Low supply, high demand. What's going to happen next? Investment into those solar panels, right? You can once you understand it and you see it, then it becomes very clear. So now, I mean, is there something out there right now that's like facing the bullwhip effect? You're going to see a lot of stuff, right? It's going to be on the back side of things. There was a gap in production in cars, right? All of a sudden, you're going to have an oversupply of cars. I believe 2024 is going to be like the year of flood of cars coming in, and people are talking about it already. But you can understand that ahead of time. Anytime you see that gap in production, anytime you all of a sudden see an obscurity within the distribution network, very difficult. Excuse me. It's very difficult to like go and look for it, to say, well, I'm going to find it in corn, or I'm going to go find it in sugar, or I'm going to go find it in this. Like, you can't go looking for it like that. You have to recognize it as it's taken place. Somebody says, holy crap, I can't get any solar panels anywhere. And you're like, what? Really? Like, are they expensive? And they're like, well, they're getting there because nobody can find them. It's just like, oh, okay. I recognize what's happening here. Right? And then you know. And so, again, like, how do you deal with that is beyond me. Like, you might be the one who says, I can't wait for 2 years for these solar panels to come down. I need them today, right? And I'm willing to pay the price, and I understand that they are going to go down because of this bullwhip effect, right? That's the difference, right? You're making a conscious decision, understanding and knowing the economic forces that are out there at play. Yeah. And so that's how you internalize. Like, I mean, like, that's how I would anyway. All right. Hey everyone, thanks for answering my question, Simon. I'm still trying to wrap my head around things. It's going to be difficult, Eli. The thing is keep going, keep listening, and I will repeat myself over and over again. So, I mean, just stick with the channel, and you're going to hear me say it again, and maybe I'll say it in a different way, and the next time you hear it, you'll be able to, like, grasp it a little bit differently. But just keep sticking with it. The stuff is not so complicated that you can't grasp it. I mean, think about it. I'm damn near a high school dropout. I like cheated my way through high school to get my diploma. I like reading stuff is very difficult for me. Like I mix up words. I don't even understand some of the words. Sometimes I have to stutter through all this stuff in order to get through it. But the point being is that it's not so complicated that you can't pick this stuff up, right? And don't let some economists out there speaking in some language that seems so difficult to wrap your head around, like they're almost speaking in code. That's exactly what they're doing. They're speaking in a way, for one, to make themselves sound smart, but also what ends up happening is as you study the economy, you start understanding the jargon and why they use these words the way they do. And I even found myself starting to speak and using a lot of that jargon too, because once you have understood the lingo, it starts making a lot more sense, right? And that's why they use those words that they do, is because when they're communicating with other people who are understanding of the economy, those words and the way that they use them have a little bit more impact than just saying like bonds, right? But once you start using like the financials, right, you start hearing something like that, then you're realizing that a lot of times, or they'll say like sovereigns, right? They'll say the sovereigns, the financials, bonds, right? They're all the same thing, right? But they might be talking about like a little particular niche of these particular markets, and that's why they say it in that particular way, right? So it's important to understand this stuff. But again, if you're just getting new to it, it's going to be confusing. I mean, there's no doubt about it, right? Just keep taking it in. Just keep taking it in. Let's see here. Because the panels were being pitched as high demand, get them before the prices go up. Yeah. Whenever someone is making you fearful, it's almost always a dead giveaway they're trying to manipulate you. Anyone, yes, that is true. If anytime that somebody is trying to be fearful of a particular outcome, then yes, that is a manipulation trying to get you to make a decision that's based more along the lines of what they are thinking. However, those people could be truly fearful of that particular thing, and they're just trying to warn you of it, right? And that's not necessarily a manipulation, right? I mean, if they're trying to say you should be fearful of this, but I'm not, right? Then that might be, a bit of it. But if they're truly fearful of it and they're explaining that fear and saying, hey man, you should be fearful of this too, I don't think that necessarily is a manipulation tactic, right? But I can understand that point behind it, and especially coming from the propaganda of the mainstream media, then definitely, All right. Anyone got a battery charger for our professor? The battery is working hard for that dome light. Yeah, it is. No, it's not working hard for it. It just turns off every, 20 minutes or whatever. Okay. Every boom bus. Yeah. I would love to wrap your cab with LED lights. Oh yeah, that would be cool, wouldn't it? Get a string of LED lights to go around in here. That would be way cool. I'm still figuring out how the bond buyback will benefit the market. My thoughts are the big banks will sell the bonds and add liquid capital to their balance sheets. So buy big bank stock. I think I think the bond buyback program itself, like once they move into it, I mean, I don't think that's going to be as impactful as a lot of people think it's going to be. In that fashion, like it's going to be like this dramatic thing that's going to be taking place. Most people probably won't even notice that there's any change taking place within the bond market itself, because what they're going to end up doing, this is going to be like bonds buying back like your bonds that you and I own, or like, maybe even like, stuff that China owns or stuff like that. What this is going to be is the primary dealers, right? So the primary dealers, they're like the big banks who go to auction. So when the Treasury is selling off these bonds, it's the primary dealers who buy them. Then everybody else buys them from the primary dealers, including the Federal Reserve. See, the Federal Reserve can't go directly to the Treasury and buy bonds. That would be monetizing the debt, and it's illegal. They can't do that. So what ends up happening is the primary dealers buy them, and then the Fed buys them from the primary dealers. So the Fed is buying something that has already been purchased. That's important to remember, because anything else would be monetizing the debt. So when these big banks, when they are doing deals in bonds, right, they are buyers and sellers, right? That's the liquidity within the market. And it's a very liquid, deep, very important market. And if there is ever a time when one of those primary dealers is having issues with the buy or sell of bonds, that is going to be very impactful on the market, right? The issues that they have, not what the Treasury is going to do, but if the primary dealer has a problem within the bond market itself as far as buying and selling those bonds. So if they find that there is somewhere along the maturity curve, right, short-term bonds all the way up to long-term, if they ever find there's a spot in there where these primary dealers are saying, we're having issues, the buy and sells here are not going very well, like it's not a very liquid market, we got people who are frustrated, who are not buying, who are not selling, whatever, right, they're having issues with it, that's when the Treasury will step in and make sure those primary dealers stay liquid, make sure that bond market flows very freely. That's the issues. Like, I don't think it'll move beyond that, right? And so since it's going to be at those primary dealers, and it's probably all going to be done right in the Federal Reserve Bank of New York anyway, right, and not anywhere else, just right inside that, I don't think it's really going to have much of an impact at all. But the perception is going to be huge, right? The people are going to be flipping out about this whole thing, and they're going to very much, cause an impact within the economy just from their own actions and reactions from it. But the actual, overall impact to liquidity and stuff, I don't think that's really going to be much at all. I think it's going to be very, a non-event, although it's going to be hyped up as a very big one. All right. Question: when do you think we are going to see a massive amount of unemployment? I don't think we will. I just don't think we will. There's a lot of things that have changed dramatically, and I would say probably the biggest one is demographics, right? I know AI is going to come in, automation, all this other stuff is going to steal our jobs, and nobody's going to have anything to do, right? Okay, I got that part. All right, we're going to set that aside for just a minute because it's not here right now doing it, okay? It may come here next month, I don't know, right? But it's not here today. What is happening today is that there is a huge group of people, older people, who are moving into retirement age, right? Getting out of the workforce. There is very few people down on the lower end to replace them. Right? So even though these people are getting out, there's very few people moving back in to replace those people who are moving out of the workforce, leaving ever increasing amounts of employment out there as these people are leaving. That's what I really feel is taking place. Will that get made up with, or filled in with the, automations and AI and all that other stuff? Yeah, probably. But at this point, that's not happening. And so give us some time. Maybe in the future that will occur. But until that actually happens, I think we're going to have for the foreseeable future here, I don't know how long, right? But I think there's going to be an ever increasing amounts of baby boomers, moving into retirement age, moving out of the workforce, and very few people who are there to replace them in the a one-for-one fashion. That'll leave more jobs opening than people to fill them, right? So at that point, I just don't see where the unemployment can rise, right? Now, yeah, you could lose a lot of corporations and people start getting unemployed and stuff like that. That could, dramatically rise unemployment going into the future, but I already feel like the bailout of the corporations has already taken place, and what we're experiencing right now is the killing of the zombie corporations. I don't feel that what's coming into the future is going to be a killing of the viable corporations, right? It's going to be clearing out the bad undergrowth, trimming the fat, whatever, right? However you want to describe it. But even through all that, I don't see where the unemployment can rise dramatically from that. People will lose their jobs, and they will have to take a job that is much less than what they wanted as far as their pay or, whatever it is, their trade that they moved into or whatever it is. They may not move to the position that they want to be, earning what they want, but it's a job, right? And just because it's not the job you want doesn't mean that it's not available. Right? And that's really where I think a lot of people are going to end up taking positions that they didn't necessarily want to because they have lost that higher position at whatever corporation that is failing. Does that kind of make sense? I don't know. The Federal Reserve doesn't see unemployment rising, not due to low interest rates, or they don't see unemployment. I don't know. Maybe they see unemployment falling, but to me, like, they're not concerned about having elevated jobs or a tight labor market. That would normally be like an inflationary scenario that would come from having like tight labor market, having to pay people more, that pay going into the products and services and stuff that we have to pay, you know, the inflationary scenario. The Fed's not concerned about that. In fact, they haven't been concerned about it for quite some time, considering that the unemployment rate has been historically low for like, I don't know, for a long time, all the way back to like the Trump administration. And so like the unemployment part of things, I don't think is going to be very dramatic. I mean, again, like, people might lose their good paying job and have to take a crappy one, but I think the crappy jobs are going to be available for them. Just, that's the way I kind of see it. All right. Guys, I don't think I'm going to get to the speech today. I'm sorry. Let's see. I think Q4 of this year, it should go up 1% or 2%. You're thinking like the Fed funds rate going up? All right. What do you think will happen as the 3-year commercial real estate loans comes due in the current interest rate environment? I think that's going to be I think that's going to be a bad deal. I think there's going to be a lot of commercial real estate that ends up, you know, going into bankruptcies, into default, into some major issues with it. I could see where there is like the possibility of rents coming down for a lot of these commercial buildings. Already you're starting to see it happening. Now, whether or not it causes like a great financial crisis type of situation, I don't know if it's actually going to get to that kind of level. Like, it very could, but I don't see where the commercial real estate at this point is such a concern coming from the Federal Reserve that they are actively planning on doing something about that. They have very rarely do they even bring it up. So it leads me to believe like one of two things, right? Either one, they know something that says that it's not as bad as what a lot of people are thinking, including myself, because I do seem like, from what I can tell, it looks pretty bad, right? Or two, they have a tool to deploy in case it gets really ugly that we just don't know about. It's got to be one of the two, because they are not concerned. And here's the thing. If we understand it, like if we as an individual could sit here and explain how it is that the commercial real estate is going to completely destroy the economy, don't you think the Federal Reserve probably figured it out too? Like, they don't know. I mean, I would find that very difficult to believe. A lot of people will say, well, they didn't know about the great financial crisis, saying that it was down to the subprime mortgages. I doubt that. Like, I believe that that's the statements that they said to the public, but internally the Federal Reserve knew the great financial crisis. Like, they were like, oh shit, there is a lot of loans that have been originating out there in the private sector market, and these are toxic loans, and there is a lot of them. And once they realized it, like how much actually existed out there, they were like, this could take down the whole thing. How is it that they were able to save the economy during that time? Right? It's because they had a plan. They knew that they may not have known to the scale or whatever, but they knew that they had a tool that could deal with it. They started buying up those toxic mortgage-backed securities. That's something that not a lot of people knew that the Federal Reserve was going to do, right? And now they did that, not by accident, thinking, man, what do we do? Shoot, we got all these toxic mortgages. I got an idea. Let's put them on our balance sheet, right? I mean, they didn't just come up with that idea. Like, they knew ahead of time. Then it was like, oh shit, if this gets bad, we're going to have to take a hold of these things, right? So they had a plan in action, ready to go. The statements coming from Ben Bernanke, there's a bunch of flapping of his gums, right? I mean, he had to tell the public something, you know? So again, like, I don't know, like, to me it seems really bad, but I just don't know those two things. Like, how much the Federal Reserve knows, and then what tools are they going to plan on using to, you know, deploy to deal with that situation. All right. Question, will it be a good idea to find zombie companies and short them all up now that the bad economic is coming and wipe them and should come while them up? Wipe them up? Um, hmm. Would it be a good idea to short the zombie companies? Yeah, I guess if you can figure that out, if you know which ones are going to fail. It's not exactly easy to tell what a zombie company is going to fail, right? And there's a lot of things to take into consideration. Like that's kind of a tricky move. Like that's I mean, I think like if you're going to take a move like that, you would have to have some pretty good knowledge about that particular company and the workings of it, or maybe even knew somebody who was at that company who had some inside knowledge of it, because there's so many factors that go into play there. Let me tell you about a credit default swap, right? Let me kind of tell you about this story. So hypothetically, let's take a company that is about ready to go bankrupt, right? They're a zombie company. They're about ready to go bankrupt, and they have a bunch of outstanding bonds out there, right? And these bonds, they're going to default on them. And there's an insurance company out there who sold credit default swaps on these bonds from this company. Now, the credit default swap is an insurance policy that says if those bonds don't get paid, this insurance policy will make you whole again. So, as an investor, the number one thing is to not lose money, right? I mean, you always want to make money, but definitely most important, do not lose money. So you purchase this bond with the intent that you're going to get a fixed income return off of it, right? And bond pays, an interest rate to it. However, this company is not doing well and it could fail, right? So you buy an insurance policy that goes with it. You pay this premium, and hopefully between the premium and what the bond pays, you make a little bit of money off of it, right? Now, if this bond fails, the company goes broke, bankrupt, or whatever, the insurance policy kicks in, you get your money back as the investor. So you're cool, right? That's the point of the credit default swap. So now let's imagine this company is about ready to go down. This insurance company who has sold these credit default swaps on these particular bonds of this company that's about ready to fail goes to the company and says, hey, you know what? If you fail, we are going to end up paying out a crap ton of money, right? Because of this insurance policy. However, if we could extend you out for a few more months, that policy is going to expire and we won't have to pay out anything. You can go ahead and default. So let me ask you, company, how much does it take to keep you guys going for a little bit longer so that these credit default swaps don't kick in? You see that? So like all of a sudden this company who should fail is now in existence. Well, that didn't work out too well, did it? Like, because you knew for sure that it was a failing company, right? But all of a sudden now these guys are still carrying along because of this situation that this insurance company is saying, hey, we don't want to pay out these credit default swaps, so we're just going to keep you whole until the policy expires. That can happen. It can work the other way too. Think about it from another fashion. It's just like people who are the holders of the credit default, they paid for the credit default swap, right? And they want that insurance policy to kick in, and they have it against this company, and they're like, hey, company, you look like you're about ready to fail. And if you hold on for a couple of more months, these policies are going to expire. What would it take to get you to go ahead and just default now instead of holding off for another couple of months? You see, like these guys pay this company to fail. Like, not saying that that's occurring. I'm just saying that's what I've read has occurred, right, in the past. So all of a sudden, trying to pick out a zombie corporation to short them, right, may not work out too well for you, right? So I'd be careful on that move. If you understood the company a little bit more and knew like a little bit of inside information about them, or just really studied a lot about that, then maybe, yeah, then I think maybe you could take a position in something like that. But I would be very nervous about just guessing on that. There is no way to time this. Nothing monetary is based on reality. Yeah, the Fed did say it would never be another recession in the future. John, I think you misunderstood that because I said that exact same thing, and it took a viewer who corrected me and said, no, you're wrong. And it wasn't the Fed, it was the Treasury, and it was Janet Yellen who said that she didn't believe that we would ever have another financial crisis in our lifetime. Right? She didn't say recession, she said financial crisis. And that's like where I kind of misinterpret it too, because I kind of think like recession is a financial crisis. And so I kind of like took that as that's what it was, but that's not what she said. She didn't say recession, she said financial crisis, and there is a difference within that. So we very well could have recessions, but as far as the financial crisis goes, they probably have now developed tools and plans to deal with any kind of crisis situation. And I'm guessing central bank digital currencies is probably it. All right. So the boomer bulge is retiring, freeing up enough jobs to prevent a crash. Makes sense. Well, I'm not. I'm not going to say it's going to prevent a crash. I'm just saying that that's like kind of the thing that is occurring right now. That leads me to believe that it's probably not going to be as dramatic of an event that a lot of people are trying to say that it is. It just makes sense to me that if you have a bunch of people retiring and not a lot of people coming in, well, you got room. You got some room. All right, question. Why are you the only one talking about credible threats and forward guidance? If Peter and George Gammon and others hear you in your speech events, don't they know or listen to your message? No, I don't think they do. I don't. I think they listened to my message when I was talking about lumber, but I don't think that they necessarily agree with my view on what's happening out there. I mean, like I was on stage with George Gammon at the Rebel Capitalist live event. I mean, I'm on stage with four other guys, and George asked me about the inflation scenario and what we are seeing, and I said I would be what I think my response to him is that I would like to see how much of an inflation scenario that we are seeing right now if we didn't have the supply chain breakdown. If all those freighters, if all that stuff wasn't sitting off the coast of LA, would we be experiencing the same inflation scenario? And he kind of looked at me and he says, wow, that's interesting. And then they went on to talk about the Federal Reserve and the money printing. Right? It was like it just basically like just got glazed over. And I'm like, well, whatever. I said my point, right? And so I mean they know, but they don't necessarily know it from the direct, right? And it's not I'm not trying to make up like reasonings or excuses or anything else. But if you have $10 million sitting in the bank, are you really going to be listening to some dude who doesn't have anything at all? Right? I mean, most likely, if you were building houses, right, and you were a contractor and you have built dozens and dozens and dozens of homes, and there's some guy who builds homes who's done a couple of them, and he comes in and says, man, I got the best technique for building homes. You wouldn't believe it. The guy who's built 24 homes is going, yeah, okay. I think I know what I'm doing, right? Because you do. I mean, you build 24 homes. You know exactly what you're doing, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that that guy who's only built one or two homes doesn't know more, right? Doesn't mean that he's understood the system just as much, can figure it all out. He doesn't do it. He hasn't done as much, right? But he can know just as much, if not more. So here's the situation that it comes down with Peter and George, right? Those guys do an intense amount of research, like lots of it. Here's the thing. They also dive into politics. They dive into a lot of other areas that I don't look at, right? I follow monetary policy. I follow the Federal Reserve. I look at their strategy because I want to know what's going on with the money. I'm not investing big time. I'm not Ken McElroy where I'm going to build 150 homes in a particular area, right? I mean, that's a whole different view that most people just are not going to have, right? It's just going to be very much different. The things that he looks at, the things that he needs in order to conduct his business is going to be so far different from the guy who's selling lumber down here at the retail end of things. It's just a completely different thing that's going on. So when I say that I've figured this stuff out with this whole average inflation, the credible threats, and all the other things, This is the stuff that I have learned from my own studies independently. Like nobody showed me this. There's no economist, there's no mentor, there's no teacher, there's nothing. There none of that stuff it came to me from somebody else. All this has come from my understanding of what it is that I have done for my own personal research. Period. Right? So when these other guys don't do it, it's because they weren't researching with me. Right? And because they don't see it the way I do, right, doesn't mean that I'm wrong. Right? I'm pulling stuff up directly from their own words. Most of these guys are taking an opinion of the past, saying this is that and this is what's going to happen or whatever, and they don't ever take into the consideration the Federal Reserve's own words. In fact, a lot of times they discredit the words coming from the Federal Reserve. They say, don't even bother listening to that. That doesn't make any sense. They're lying, right? They say all this stuff like that. I'm not saying George and Peter say that. I'm just saying a lot of people, economists out there, say that. Right? Well, you take on that view, and then everything that they say is inconsequential, doesn't mean anything. So now they're looking out at the reality of situations. Look how much this cost. They're destroying your life. The Fed did this. The Bidenomics did this. Right? Well, I look at things and I'm like, no, that's completely wrong. Like, I don't see it that way. I see it in a much different fashion. I'm looking at it from a monetary policy point of view, not from Bidenomics. So again, like 30,000 foot view, looking down on the economy, somebody who's down in the trenches, boots on the ground, talking with everybody who's within the workforce, all the working stiff, all the working class jobs that come together to make this event happen, right? I'm hanging out with those guys. We see it so much differently. And I'm not saying that they're inaccurate. I'm not saying that I'm inaccurate, right? All I'm saying is that the view that each one of us has is independently to the economy, right? Each person has their own independent economy. And that's so difficult that took a lot for me to finally understand and realize that that person who's standing over there has a completely different view. Their actions, the way they conduct themselves, the business that they do, everything about what they have is a completely different view in actions and economy than what you are experiencing. All right? Yeah, we both go down there, we buy the same package of hamburger, right? We're both doing that part of things, but everything that got us to that is different, right? And that's where we're understanding it for ourselves. I don't care if nobody ever brings up credible threats or average inflation rate. They don't need to. I don't need them to bring it up. I don't need to be validated with my information by having it on the news or something like that. I know that I'm right, right? And I'm not saying that I'm right and everybody else is wrong. I just know that I'm right for the direction that I am looking at it, right? And that's really what it comes down to. I mean, you're going to find... you go to the Rebel Capitalist event and you're going to find economists get up on stage and they will contradict each other all the way through. Like, not picking on each other, saying, well, they said this and I'm saying this. They don't do that, right? They get up there, they give their opinion, and their opinion could be very different from the next person who's on stage. And that's really I think that's important. It's important to understand for each individual person to look at it in that fashion, right? To be that open-minded about it. And to be able to take that information in. I mean, you listen to Brent Johnson and Jeff Snyder, and then you start listening to Lynette Zhang and Mark Moss. I mean, none of this stuff sounds the same, right? Jeff Snyder and Brent Johnson kind of sound somewhat similar, and not so much Mark is much into Bitcoin, but they're kind of similar in sounding when it comes to the reasonings to buy gold as Lynette Zhang is, right? So you listen to these two, it's different, okay? And not to say that anything is wrong with that. It's just their view. All right. So the lack of liquidity in the bond market may cause the blood in the streets and create the buying opportunity. For your information, your effort is worth more than the $9.99 I'm praying for the soft landing for us all. I don't know if the liquidity or the lack of liquidity in the bond market is going to create the blood in the streets scenario that you're quite anticipating. I mean, it very well could. I mean, it could trigger that, but I mean, it's just with so much foresight and knowledge of that coming, I just don't see how that could be the case. Like, it's not there's not going to be a crisis if everybody knows it's coming. Like, you prepare for it and you deal with it. The crisis comes from surprise, like, catching people off guard. So I don't know. It could be triggered by that. It could be just good timing. In the same situation, I think the market is going to go down anyway. Like, by that point, I think the middle of like 2024 is going to probably be the time that you want to really start getting in that dollar cost averaging into stocks. I'm not trying to like predict that timing. It just seems kind of going that way. Yeah. Bank term funding program for CRE coming to the city near you. Question: if zombie companies go under, won't that cause layoffs? Yeah, they do, and it's happening right now, right? And I mean, that's the whole thing. If the zombie companies fail, the people who are getting laid off move into the service industry. It may not be the job they want, but it's a job that's available. And so this is kind of what I see taking place. Yeah. So yeah, it would cause layoffs, but again, like, I don't see unemployment rising dramatically because of that. Gonna go. I'm really tired. See ya, everyone. All righty, Steven. Thank you so much for being here. It is kind of running a little late, a lot later than I wanted it to. We're gonna have to do this speech on another time. I just don't think we have time to do it tonight. There's just too much to go over in this, and it's too good. So we'll do this on Saturday. We'll redo this speech again, or try to do this speech again. Everyone has different views in base cases, which are often contradictory, e.g., massive deflation inbound or melt up inbound. It's hard to figure out where we're heading. Yeah, and that's true. I mean, that's very true. It, being I think that's the part of being prepared, right? That's one of the reasons why I will buy stocks next week, or maybe the week after, depending, on how I'm sitting. But it's like, you don't know. Like if I don't buy the stocks now, then you'll never own them, and if the liquidity crisis never comes, I may never find my buying opportunity. So you got to be in it, right? One way or the other. And then living in that constant fear or hope, right? I think that's probably dangerous. It's one of the things that I found, like with the housing market and myself, is that I knew deep down I really wanted a house, but I didn't want to get burned again. I bought a house and it completely went underwater, and I couldn't get out from underneath it, and eventually just took everything out of me, and I went into foreclosure, and I lost it, and I lost everything, and depression and all that other stuff, and I was very scared about landing in that same situation again. And I almost, like, I pretty much put a mental block on myself from buying a house, right? Like, put it into the point that it was just like, the only way that you should buy a house is if the housing market crashes. Like, this is kind of the thought that I had. And I don't know if I necessarily said that out loud, but I think that's probably internally what I was kind of hoping for, is that there would be a housing market crash, and then I would be able to get my house back, right, during that time, because that's how I lost my house, essentially. Now, that's not the way it went down, right? I ended up getting a house. I was almost forced into it. I didn't really want to do it. I was pulling my hair out. I thought it was the worst decision I could ever make, or whatever, right? But I eventually moved into that house, and I realized, damn, that was a good decision, right? The house price has gone up. I'm able to make the payments. If I was to try to buy that house today, I wouldn't be able to get into it. So I'm very thankful that the situation came up that actually forced me into that house. But if I was to make a conscious decision at the time to say, do you really want this house? I would have said no. But I didn't feel like I had any other choice. You see, like, this is one of the major problems that exists out there, is that I knew from everything that I had seen and everything in the past that there was going to be a problem, but it was buried deep down inside from a fear that I had from a foreclosure that I had experienced in the past. It's psychological, right? All right. Question: in those speech events, have you talked with those big guys about forward guidance and credible threats? Do they listen to you, or they're ego won't allow them to learn something new. No, I don't think it's that their ego too big to allow them to learn something new. I mean, if their ego was too big for that, then they never would have invited me or given me the respect when it came to like just being on stage and talking about lumber. I mean, G. Edward Griffin, right? I mean, the guy who wrote The Creature from Jekyll Island, like the dude when it comes to exposing the Federal Reserve. Like, I mean, sat there and very intently listened to every word that I had to say about the lumber industry and was just like, and took it all in and was just like, wow, man, I didn't know it from that side. Like, I mean, he literally was just like very interested in what I had to say. He took in every word. He listened to me. I mean, it was like I was almost nervous talking about it. I'm like, oh my God, I got G. Edward Griffin here, you know, and I'm like explaining the lumber market and what happened and why the prices had moved so dramatically. And I'm explaining this to G. Edward Griffin. Like, this dude was like a god to me, you know? He was like my ultimate hero. And I'm explaining the lumber industry to him, and he's listening, right? So it's not like these guys have too big of an ego, right? It's just that once you have a belief, it's very difficult to change your belief, right? Especially if your belief was hit with emotions or something. Like here, they present some evidence to you, right? Look at this, right? And then they show you how this is gonna impact your life. It's gonna hurt you, you know. This is gonna make you rich. This is gonna, you know, destroy everything, whatever, right? So you got some information, and then they hit you with some emotion, right? And then once, not saying George or anything, I'm just saying information in general, like the narrative or whatever, right? So you got this belief, you got some emotion into it, and then they start hitting you with the facts. Boom, 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 boom. Look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this. This is the reason, this is the reason, this is the reason. Pretty soon, it's a belief. It's in you, right? This is what you believe because of this fashion in which it went down. Okay? Once that happens, it makes it very difficult to change, right? To flip that into another direction, to say, wow, man, I got to kind of let go of everything that I understood and believed before and take in a whole new belief system, right? That's very difficult to do. So when it comes to like understanding the Federal Reserve, if you believe that the Federal Reserve screwed up, like they had no idea what they were doing, they were flying on the seat of their pants, making decisions on, you know, off the cuff or whatever, if this is what you believe and you have all the evidence that proves that, it's going to be very, very difficult to understand the credible threat theory, right? It's going to be difficult to wrap your head around it. Now, not saying that you wouldn't be able to like take on the concept and to be able to say, I recognize the concept of what it is that you are saying, but to have internalized that into your subconscious to say that I can recognize when the credible threats are being presented, that ends up becoming very difficult. You can have the concept and understand the concept of it, but then not be able to recognize it because you don't truly believe it, right? There's a major difference inside of that. Like they could even know, like straight up explain the credible threat theory, right? Show evidence of it. I've done this, right? And still not be able to retain it in a way that says, everything that I know about economics, they can't incorporate this credible threat theory into it. It doesn't allow it. It's just not allowed into it, especially if you're looking at it through a political fashion, because that's the blame that you're putting on it. Not putting it on the credible threat. You're saying, oh, this is done because of Bidenomics, right? You know, and again, like, you know, I'm not trying to discredit that view, saying that's wrong. I'm not trying to say that at all. I just don't see it that way. My belief and everything that I got came from studying this stuff, not from studying somebody else's like idea that they failed. I'm studying what the Federal Reserve is saying and planning on doing as best as I can figure that out. And what I figured out is that they use credible threats. They use it pretty regularly. And part of that is the average inflation rate, which nobody seems to talk about. And I don't get it. Like, It seems to me that that should be the number one thing that people are focused in on to try and understand where the Federal Reserve is going to be adjusting their monetary policy, their Fed funds rate to, is to understand that 2% average inflation. But nobody thinks about it like that. They talk about a 2% target. Even the Fed says 2% target. They say goal. Like they don't necessarily use the word target. And if they do, they usually add the word over time, or they'll use 2% goal, right? So that people think, oh, they're 2% target, but the goal isn't a 2%. It's a 2% average over time. If you go and you read the average inflation targeting in financial crisis recovery, if you go and you read this, they actually mention that. Like, this is our goal, right? Is this 2% average inflation rate over time. So when the Fed says 2% goal, a lot of times people will look at that and say replace it with the word target, right? But that's not it. If you understand their goal from reading the Federal Reserve's economic letter, then you would know that it's an average that they're going for. So again, it's like, I can't make those guys look at it in the view that I have. Like I can't do that, and I can't make anybody else see it that way either. I'm not trying to make anybody see it that way. I explain it in the way that I view the Federal Reserve and the economy, and how I've positioned myself with this information. I feel I've done pretty well. My whole goal in life, like for earning money on YouTube, was $100. Like I had no goal for earning money on YouTube, right? The $100 was just simply because that's the threshold for them to send you any money, right? Is you need to make at least $100. So that was my goal, was $100 on that. After that, when I started to earn some revenue on YouTube, my thought after that was, man, it would be really nice to be able to pay a bill at will without any stress. Like if a phone bill comes in, if the light bill comes in, whatever, just to be able to pay it without having to stress it, right? I got that. Those were my goals. Like my goals weren't to be a billionaire or, having, hundreds of millions of dollars or something like that. That was never like my intentions or my goals. My goals were to do exactly this, was to get, this was my goal. And so now, trying to figure out where it is that I need to go next, right? That's really what this is all about. How other people see it, I don't know. I don't know why so many people were insistent on Federal Reserve money printer go burr, but failed to look at or even to even consider that it was a supply chain breakdown. Even though I explained it quite well and proved it in lumber, showed it in lumber, called it out in lumber. I mean, I don't know how I could have gotten more accurate or more predictive or more vocal about the lumber industry than I did. But I got it, right? And even through all that, I still couldn't get people to look at the supply side of things. They were still just stuck in money printer go burr, right? And I'm like, I can't stop that, right? It's too noisy, it's too big, it's too obvious, right? That I can't, and even trying to explain to people how it is that supply demand and the demand side of things, right? The added consumption, that added consumption is really what starts driving inflation. People are like, dude, why don't you just face it? It's the money printer, right? And that's what people tell me. And it's just like, I can't. It's not the money printer, because if it was the money printer, then lumber wouldn't have come back down. That's all that it comes to it, right? And I wouldn't have been able to call it as accurately as I did if it was the money printer that caused it, right? Because I didn't look at the money printer, I was looking at the supply. And that's what it ultimately came down to. All right. And you also have to understand, I can message George, I can message Ken Mount, I can message Jason, I can message all these people right now. I don't talk to them every day, right? I don't hey guys, what's up? How are you doing? They're busy dudes, right? They are out there making their things happen. They're chasing excellence, right? I mean, unless I have something in, unless there's an intent, hey, you guys want to do an interview or, something like that, I'm not going to call them up and say, hey, what's up, man? What you think about the economy today? They don't have time for that, right? I mean, Peter Schiff, you should have seen it. I think he thought he was going to give me a 10-minute interview. I asked him for an hour, and he just about an hour. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, I know, dude. It's like 100 grand to you, but it's like, you know, I mean, it's like a hell of a lot more to me, you know? I mean, it's like, you know, I mean, like his time, I don't even know what his time is worth, but he probably, an hour of his time is worth more than a year of mine, right? I mean, considering how much money he has and makes. I didn't, like, to me, I didn't care if he's a billionaire. Like, that part was inconsequential to me. I wanted an hour-long interview, and I was going to go for that because that's what my interviews are. They're an hour long. He agreed to it, and he gave me an excellent interview, like a, a a top tier interview. You know, I couldn't believe it. I was just like, man, I got the Peter Schiff on my show. And all the questions that I asked him, he answered like very thoughtfully and fully. And even when I tried to cut the interview a little short, he was just like, he saw that there was like another 10 minutes to go to meet that hour. And he just started talking and he carried it on for like another 10 minutes because he wanted to make it an hour long. That's literally what Peter Schiff did. It was so cool. But again, like I'm not in communication with these guys every day asking them what's going on in the economy or what their thoughts are on the economy. That's not like, unless I have some kind of business to do with them, I'm not like in communication with them, right? And so even though like I do, like I can talk to them anytime I want, I don't. You know, I mean they're like I said, they're busy guys. They don't need some dude just commercial real estate. Oh, I should have known that. I'm sorry, all-nighter. All right. All-nighter for having to work. You're still on point, and us adults notice. All right. Thanks, Acer. Do you think birth marriage rates will go back up when AI automates half the jobs? No, I don't. I think what we're experiencing is an economic event that's happening here, and I do not see how there's going to be any kind of family formations coming from this until we have an absolute collapse of the entire system and going into like a depressionary event. The problem is that advanced, like people might get married, but I doubt they're going to have like family formation and kids and stuff like that. And even still, even in that, like getting married is going to be very difficult in this day and age, considering like some of the economic situations that we are now in. Like there was a time in which that it wasn't as easy for an individual to make it on their own. Okay? There, like you had to have a family in order to just make it, right? But now it's not that way. Like people can live individually, independently, right? Not to mention, and this is like, I know this is one that's a very sensitive topic, but hypergamy, right? When you have a society where women are is advanced in education, degrees, professions, all that other stuff, where they earn a significant amount of money, it makes it very, very, very difficult for them to fall in love with a man, right? And it's very difficult for a woman to love a man anyway, because ultimately they really have no unconditional love except for children, right? And that's it's a survival thing, right? I mean, they have to be able to throw the old man to the bear and take the kids and run. Like this is like, this is how the human race survived. So the female can't be that attached to the male counterpart, right? Because of survival things, right? They have to be able to bail and take the kids and run. And that's that's not something to get angry with. It's just something to understand, right? So if the women of the society today end up earning a lot of money, degrees, professions, and doing all the other stuff, it's going to be very difficult to find a counterpart who's higher than that, right? Because that's ultimately what they would need in order to satisfy that hypergamy, which is an instinctual thing within them, right? To be able to find a guy who's better than them, right? And that's not try to say that they need to, that they're not better, right? But they're not going to be very approving of a guy who's lesser than them, right? If they earn more money, if they are more of a leader, if they are, the one who is dictating everything that's going on, they are not going to be very satisfied with that dude, right? Everybody wants the leader. Everybody wants the man to be the leader, right? And I'm not saying that for every relationship. There's probably relationships out there where it's, where the roles are reversed and everybody's cool and happy and all that other stuff. I'm not trying to say that it doesn't exist. What I'm saying, generally speaking, that's the way it is, right? Women want men who are good, better, strong, leaders, professionals, know what they're doing, right? This is the type of position that they need to be in. And if they're already doing that, then it makes it difficult, right? It makes it almost impossible. And that's really the situation that I think we're running into nowadays. And I don't see any reversal to that. Like, I don't see how that can change. And it's again, it's not like people like say, oh, well, we fell from religion or we did all this, or society. Like, it's just the natural consequences of having a standard of living that has become so easy, right? That people don't have to rely on a traditional style of family formation anymore to make it through this world, right? There was a time when you grow old, if you didn't have a family, what were you going to do, right? I mean, people are trying to figure that out nowadays, but there was a time where, grandma lived at home, right? And he took care of her. Like the two old people lived together, and then the old man finally, worked his ass off and died, and then you got this old lady, and she moves into the household, and you take care of her, and the grandchildren are running around, and all this. This is how it used to go, right? And then it was just like you had all these people who, families took care of each other. It doesn't work like that anymore because you don't really have the family formation like we once did. So society doesn't look like that anymore, and there's no going back to it, right? I mean, the only thing that would bring that back is to have a collapse, a depression, and force people into, it doesn't matter how smart you are, you're not making any money anyway, right? So now you're forced into like community again, right? You're forced into like, busted off into family units so that you can work together and support each other and, raise that family or whatever it is that you're doing, because you can't just go and do it independently on your own. You can't just say, hey, screw you, I'm going to go make my own money and have my own life. It doesn't work like that. There's not even a concept like that, And so I don't see it going back. All right. In my area in Ohio, since, I guess that's Cincinnati maybe? A few months ago, everyone was busy and hard to find people to work in my projects. Now it seems everyone is available, and I see a lot of people desperate trying to work. I'm actually seeing that too. I know a couple of carpenters who are more of like framers. So they do the actual construction of the house. They don't, like, they might do some finished work or some other stuff, but they're basic, that's what they do, is they frame. And I've had a couple of them tell me now, it's just like, geez, we don't have anything planned for another couple of months, a lot of these guys are like freelance, so they'll jump between contractors or whatever. And I've had a few of them come to me and it's just like, man, this is weird. I haven't had this happen in a very long time, where, they didn't have a job to go to or didn't have one lined up, right away. It's just like, projects are in the works and stuff. And again, like, I believe that's that gap in production that I've been talking about for quite some time. We had all these permit issuance during the pandemic that really ran up, but then there was a drop in permit issuance. That drop in permit issuance is going to be in the system for a little while, right? If they're not issuing out permits and they're not starting new projects, they're not pouring foundations or framing or building out or doing any of that other stuff. So this is the moment, right? Now, give it some time, because I see the building permit issuance seems to be increasing some. Give it some time and you'll start seeing that start to reverse and change. But how long that takes or how impactful that'll be or how deep, I really don't know. But I agree, I'm seeing some of that happening as well. All right, I hear the media talking about commercial real estate going bust, but I don't really buy it. Do you? Sounds a lot like residential real estate, but never came true. Again, like, I mean, we kind of covered that a little bit. There's two things that I just don't know coming from the Federal Reserve. Like, how much do they really know about the commercial real estate and how deep the problem really is? And then the other one, what tool do they plan on deploying if it does turn into a crisis situation? Those are two things that I just don't know. Like, I don't know anywhere where you can go and get that information, right? Not at the Fed, not anywhere. You can probably find somebody who might assume, maybe somebody who worked at the Fed who knows something about it, who might be able to talk about it, but I don't know who they are, you know. Maybe Joseph Wang knows. He worked at the Fed. He's a pretty smart dude. Let's see. I saw the video of you next to G. Edward Griffin. Great stuff. He's a hero. Yeah, that was G. Edward Griffin sitting next to him, his wife, and then I'm sitting next to my wife, who is dishes every day, and All Nighter's sitting next to her. So yeah, All Nighter hider, dishes every day. G. Edward Griffin and the Uneducated Economist were all in that little short video. All right. Nothing will go bust as long as the Fed can cover it with the funny money. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't think anything can go bust if we know that it's happening. Like, you know, like if somebody can explain exactly how the housing market is going to crash, then guess what? The Fed could probably explain it too. Just saying. And they're not going to allow it to happen and be like, ah, crap, you're right. Throw in the towel. You know, I mean, then it doesn't go down like that, right? All right, catch you on the next one. All righty, so yeah, I kind of gave this a little bit too long. We're 2.5 hours into this now. I'm sorry, guys. I really wanted to cover this speech, but we're gonna have to do it on Saturday. And you know, since we're all friends and hanging out and doing this membership anyway, I think getting through these questions, a lot of this has been a lot of fun too. So we've answered a lot of stuff, broken down a lot of different complex topics today. Become a billionaire, UE. Hey, I'm on it, David. I mean, I would love to. You know, there's going to come a time that I'm going to have more of a product to sell, right? This is my preliminary into this. Like, I didn't know. Like, I don't like doing the sponsorships. I sold, you know, I promoted some gold companies. I don't even know who the hell they are. I don't, you know, I don't feel good about it. I earn a bunch of money off of it, but I don't like, I mean, to be honest, I see it. Like, you know, somebody was just like, how come you don't have $1 million now? I can. I could have. I really could have. Like, I can see it. It's right there. But I can't do it. Like, I can't do it. Like, I don't feel good about doing the sponsorships. I don't feel good about, like, all these other YouTubers who can blast 3 or 4 sponsorships into their videos and not think anything about it. I, dude, I wish I could do that. I really wish I could. I do a sponsorship video. I walk around for days afterwards going, man, I don't know anything about that company. I don't know if anybody's going to buy it. What are they going to think? Like, I mean, I don't feel good about it. I love promoting the Uneducated Economist. I absolutely am hugely inspired to try and push this membership. I just think that this is like by far one of the coolest things that I have done in a very long time. And I'm motivated behind it. And so I am looking forward to having other products that I could push and sell that are along this kind of lines. Like this is what I want to do. This is my passion. This is what's driving me. And so if I can make $1 million or $1 billion, or if I could just make even a few dollars, I don't care. Doing this is why I want to do it, right? And this makes me feel good. Not that stuff over there, right? I see it. It's $1 million. It's sitting right there, like right there. You know, and it's just like, it just drives me crazy. The people can go get it. I can't, right? I just don't feel good about that. I'm going to get it a different way. And much like that survival, that, you know, go for it. You're the lion, you know, who cares about what other things going on out there, right? Well, you got to feel good about yourself, right? You got to feel good about what you have done. I don't want to sit there and just promote a bunch of things that I don't believe in so that I can make a bunch of money and say, hey guys, I did. Thanks for the views. You know, I'm out of here. I hope you guys, good luck. Good luck to you all. Like, I'm not going to do that to you. All right. I'm not doing that to me. I'm not doing it to me. I'm not doing it to you. And so this is how I need to do it. I mean, I need to promote myself with this kind of thing. And if I do it right and I bring enough value to it, it'll work. That's that. I just know it will. Like, I don't think about like how it's going to work. I just know that it's going to, so long as I do it. Right. And I know there's going to be problems along the way. I'm going to stumble. There's going to be issues, whatever. It don't matter. Right. I mean, that stuff's going to happen. That's how you learn. But I can't go and pick that stuff up over there. Right. But I can do this, and I'm looking forward to it. All right. Red Sea instability is causing shipping container costs to rise, which will drive inflation. Yes, it will. But then again, you also have to think like once those issues are relieved, right? Is it temporary? Is it short term? I mean, that's the problem with a lot of this stuff is that yes, it will cause an initial impact, but is that going to be everlasting? Right? That's difficult to see when it's an event just like that. Like to me, I'm looking for something that's going to be everlasting, something that's going to completely change the way that we're doing things. And a disruption, war, you know, environmental impact or something like that, those are generally temporary things, although they're very impactful to an individual's person's life, especially when it comes to like an environmental, hurricane or something like that that comes in. Even though it's very impactful to that individual, generally over time, what you're going to find is that the problems that were created from that get alleviated, and just kind of dissipate out. And so that's kind of what I see happening from that as well. What will change is like, to me, when I look at like changes in shipping or distribution, I kind of take it back to something like very, very small and simple, right? I was using this analogy earlier. I was trying to come up with like an analogy for inflation and stuff, but I kind of thought about like, say you have a particular a town or city or something like that. And in this town and cities, they really like to eat ribeyes, right? I like ribeyes, so everybody in this town, they like ribeyes too. We all go out, we eat ribeyes, and we have like a few different restaurants or whatever that makes that cooks and serves ribeyes, and they generally cost about the same. From one restaurant might be a little bit more than the other, but generally, they're all kind of costing about the same price. Well, one day they have a tour bus that now makes a route to this particular town. It has a really nice, scenic views or, nice environment to be in. So this bus comes and it drops people off who also consume these ribeyes. Well, all of a sudden, there's not enough ribeyes in this town because they're getting consumed, right? So a couple of things happen. One, the price of ribeyes go up because now the demand for them is much higher, right? And the supply is only so far. Now, what ends up happening is that the people who produce ribeyes, right, can only produce so much, right? Who live in this town, like, and they're like, hey, we got these fields, whatever. We can only go so far with these ribeyes. Right? So the supply can only be right here, but you got this demand that's much higher. Right? So now what's going to happen is that the next town over, the guy was just like, holy moly, man, I got ribeyes over here. You're selling them for a hell of a lot in that town. The price I have them for and the distance that it would cost me to travel to your town, I think I could sell you ribeyes for about that price. I'll bring in the supply of ribeyes, right? But the only way that it makes it effective for him to travel that distance is the price that they're paying for due to the lack of supply within this town, right? You see, like, what's kind of happening here? So this is kind of how I look at it. Well, the cost of that travel, like if you could take those ribeyes and somehow make the traveling, the distance that it goes to diminish, right? The value of that to come down, or the price that costs to come down, well then you can make more profit off of your ribeyes once you get them to that town. So somebody figures that out. They're like, man, you're driving that old truck over there, right? And I figured out how to, I don't know, use a waterway or something like that, right? And it's so much easier and cheaper to sail these ribeyes down instead of delivering them on a truck. So now all of a sudden bringing them on a sail is so much cheaper. And now there's a flood of ribeyes coming into this town. And the farmers who are of that town are saying, hey, yo, wait a minute now, we're getting hurt, right? We were used to selling ribeyes for an expensive price. We're supplying ribeyes at an expensive price, but now this waterway with the shipment of ribeyes is coming in, and it's making it too cheap. Like they're killing our price. This sucks, right? And the town mayor says, well, maybe we'll charge them a tax for bringing in these cheap ribeyes, right? I mean, since the economic forces are more than you can handle right now, maybe we'll try and deal with this by charging a tax. You see what's happening here? This is how I kind of look at things, right? So even though like the distance traveling is expensive. There's cheaper ways to bringing it in, find that profit from it. But if you do find the profit, well, they're going to come in with taxes or tariffs or something like that to start competing against them. See, this is how these are some of the ways that I internalize a lot of stuff. I'm not sure where I was going with that story, but I think you guys kind of get it. Hey, did somebody send me a super chat? Right on. Well, thank you so much. I wasn't expecting that tonight. All right. Where was that? Okay. It's good to respect people's time. Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Simon. And that's what I said with Peter. I mean, it was just like I knew that it was. I mean, I knew that he was a little bit aggravated when I asked him for an hour, but he gave it to me, right? And he was really good about it too. I thanked him. I went up and shook his hand and thanked him for that. And he didn't talk to me much. He was just like shook my hand. He was like, "Yeah, you're welcome." And he left. Right? It was kind of funny. It was like I was open to actually chat with him, but yeah, it is. Especially guys like that. Like an hour of my time is almost insignificant comparatively to an hour of Peter's time. And for me to ask that of him, I mean, like go and ask somebody for $100,000 and see if they give it to you. Right? And now I'm not saying that Peter's time is worth $100,000, but it's worth a lot, right? And I couldn't go and ask him for that money, but I could ask him for that little bit of time, and it's worth it. It was worth it to me. It was worth it to him, to spread the word. And I think about how valuable that hour was. Like, I mean, I was like absolutely ecstatic, right, to get it, because most people would never even have a chance to talk to Peter Schiff ever. Right. And here he gave me an entire hour that I got to ask him whatever I wanted. And it was worth a lot. Right. I mean, I can't put a monetary value on that because it was worth so much more than I could ever imagine. Alrighty, guys, we have got to call this quits. This is going on. I don't know if I'm going to get through all these questions. I'm trying. All right. If you see people with no jobs because low demand, won't that cause layoffs because companies have less jobs? Well, yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I think that's the level of which, the level of concern that you were looking for is hypothetical. Right? I mean, it doesn't exist yet. So once we get there, then yeah, we can start, kind of talking about that. But I don't see that as happening as of yet. Like even the jobs numbers came out today, they were still much better than what anybody would ever anticipate an upcoming recession would be like. And because those jobs numbers came in so much better, you saw like the U.S. Treasury yield starting to rise because of it, because people are like, oh crap, there's no way that the Federal Reserve is going to be lowering interest rates if we have a hot, tight labor market. That would typically be an inflationary scenario, right? Even though technically I don't think the Federal Reserve's worried about employment right now. Most people who are looking out at the economy would say that a tight labor market would cause inflation because typically that's what it would be. It's called the Phillips curve, but the Federal Reserve doesn't really look at that anymore. They realize that it isn't as critical as it once was. Critical data, anyway. Thank you for your incredible insight and dedication to us in the channel, Simon. Yes, absolutely. Mass administrator, you bet. I mean, this is what I do. Like, if this could be my only thing that I had going on to try and earn money for my life or for my family, I would love it. I would do it, right? And it's like very much a passion. I mean, I'm out here 2.5 hours and I didn't even get to what I wanted to, right? I mean, it was just like, I'm so into, answering these questions and making sure that we all understand, at least stuff from the point of view that I'm seeing it. And it may or may not like jive with your opinions or something like that, but it is a view, right? And it is a view that you can compare with, and it may help you understand your points a little bit better. Maybe it'll solidify, your view, like saying that the disagreement is just like, no, what you just said, actually, I am in disagreement, and I actually am now more in agreement with my own view from what you just said, even though it's the opposite. Like, I've had people say that to me before, and it's kind of weird to think, like, why are you following me? And it was just like, because I really like your perspective, even though I don't agree with it. It is just like, wow, well, that's kind of cool, It was just like to have somebody say, no, you have a very intelligent understanding of what's taking place here. even though I don't agree with it, I really like this understanding because it's like a different view from what I am looking at. And people literally tell me that all the time, dude, keep doing what you're doing. I love this, right? Even though it's a view that's different, right? Or opposite. And so, yeah, thank you. Yeah. Would you make and sell econ courses and guidebooks? Yes, David, I would. I would love to do that. And I've thought about that many times. And so like I think about the course, like how do I do a course that helps people, like, understanding the economy from a working class point of view 101. Like I don't even know where to start. This is my problem with it, is like I don't even know, like, chapter 1. What do I say? Right? And so this course, like, I would love to do. I would love to have this set up and do it. I'm like literally lost on where to begin, on how to put this thing together in a way that I know once I get rolling on it, then I probably would. But like I've thought about courses, I've thought about books for a very long time, and I have, like, I don't know what it is, but I have a very difficult time trying to figure out how to, like, separate these things in, and then what it is that these courses are going to cover and what it is that I need to put into them. Like I know I can visually see, like, this idea. Like I can feel it, I can see it. I just don't know, like, what each one of these individuals are. Like I don't know how to put that together. I know the words, I know the economy, I know the stuff that needs to be said. But trying to get that into a course so that somebody looks at that and goes like, man, I knew nothing of the economy. I took your course and now I got it, right? That part right there, like I would really love to have it, and I'm just not sure how that's supposed to go together. I'm working on it. I'm trying to do it. Like I think this is kind of step one, doing this membership and kind of getting this way. I think this is kind of stepping me into that idea. So, I mean, maybe we'll see what happens from it. All right, but yes, I would. Guy265, thank you so much for the $10. Much blessing to and yours. Okay, man, thank you so much. Thanks, Guy. Let's see here. LXG2 with the 10. Great Q&A. All right, on, guys. You guys are so awesome here. Thanks, LGX2. Okay. Cool. Are we done at the end here? Nice. Comment. All right. Please start with your topic first, then answer the questions later so you can do what you wanted. Yeah, I wanted to make sure that I got through all the comments, and that's the thing, man. If I'd done this and then went to the comments, we would be out here for like 4 hours. So I got through most of the comments, and that's what was really important to me. Well, let me leave you with just this little bit in here so that I don't leave you completely out on the speech, because let me see here. Okay, so I'm just going to read this part to you, and then we'll call it a night. And this will give you guys something to think about here until Saturday, and then we'll move on from. Yeah. Okay. Let me just read this part to you, and then we'll go. Okay. It says here, at our most recent, now remember, this is Michelle Bowman, who is a voting member of the FOMC, the Federal Open Market Committee. She gave this speech November 28th of 2023, so that was about a little over 6 weeks ago from today. It's titled Reflections on the Economy and Monetary Policies. And this is what it has to say. At our most recent FOMC, at our recent meeting, the FOMC voted to maintain the target range for the federal funds rate at the current level and continue to run off the Fed's security holdings. So this is the unwinding of the balance sheet and plateauing off of the Fed funds rate. Inflation readings have come in lower, with some of the improvement related to continued easing of supply side pressures. So I found that pretty interesting that, talking right there, right off the bat, the inflation, lowering the inflation with some of the improvement related to continued easing of the supply side pressures, which is something that I have been saying for a very long time, right? It's more about the supply side of things, and the Federal Reserve is looking at that as well. But the level of inflation remains high, with the most recent readings of 12-month total and core PCE inflation at 3.4% and 3.7% respectively. And recent progress has been uneven. The economy has remained strong as the FOMC has raised the federal funds rate. Right? So what they're saying is that even though they got the economy, or I'm sorry, even though they got the Fed funds rate up, which should have put pressure down on the economy, they're saying that the economy activity is doing quite well. Right? The economy remains strong as the FOMC has raised the federal funds rate. The recent data indicated that the economy or the economic activity accelerated in the third quarter, with real GDP growing at a 4.9% annual rate. The most recent employment report showed a continuation of healthy jobs gains. Right? Labor force participation has improved over the past year, with a somewhat slower but still strong pace of job gains, which we've had a report today that said that exact same thing. A sign that the labor market supply and demand may be coming into better balance. At our last meeting, I supported the FOMC's decision to hold the target range for the federal funds rate at the current level, as we continue to assess incoming information and its implications for the outlook. But, this is important, my baseline economic outlook continues to expect that we will need to increase the Fed funds rate further to keep policy sufficiently restrictive to bring inflation down to our 2% target in a timely way. However, monetary policy is not on a persistent course, on a preset course, and I will continue to closely watch the incoming data as I assess the implications for the economic outlook and the appropriate path of monetary policy. So now, it sounds to me, when I read that, coming from Michelle Bowman, who, again, is a voting member of the FOMC, that she is not convinced that the interest rates need to come down to be supportive of the economy, and that the economy is actually chugging along quite well, with the inflation now trending towards the 2% goal or target or whatever it is that they're going for. So in my mind, when I think about this and the things that she just said inside of that, it was just a short chunk of the speech too that I just read. When I hear those words and I think about some of the things that I see going on out there, it doesn't lead me to believe that there is any kind of real desire coming from the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates. That is their ammo. They use that to help stimulate the economy, to get economic activity going. She's saying that is going okay. Everything is fine, or fine-ish. I mean, I guess I should say not fine, but fine-ish, right? And that's one of the reasons following this, as opposed to the mainstream narrative, is going to give you a much better understanding of what it is that the Federal Reserve is going to be doing into the future. I think that's very important. Okay. We're going to leave it at that, guys. We are almost 3 hours into this. It has been an awesome live stream. This has been great. I think I'm going to let this one go out to public, although I can't imagine somebody sitting around for 3 hours watching this video. They might. But I think it's a great piece. I think we did a great job of answering questions, asking questions, covering a lot of the topics that are very confusing. You know, we're trying to internalize this stuff for ourselves, and I think, you know, this is probably one of the best ways that we could do this for understanding the economy, for understanding it for ourselves, and to figure out what it is that we need to do for ourselves going into the future. Because again, nobody's going to be able to tell you. There's no video, there's no president, there's no economist, there's nothing out there that's going to tell you what it is that you need to do, but you can tell yourself what you need to do if you understand what it is that's happening out there. All right, in order to start your course, buy a book and follow their index with our approach and problem solve. That is how I do my classes. Okay, well, that's interesting. Okay, well, that's, I mean, at least it gives me some sort of direction, right? Thank you. I gotta do this. I gotta do it, right? I mean, not only do I have to do it to make it easier for people to get access to this information, but this is what I need to do for myself, right? This is how I get through this world. Okay. Uneducated economist, you guys let me know.